Good morning, everyone. This is the public hearing and a public meeting of the Committee of the Whole regarding bills number 250195, 250196, 250197, 250198, 250199, 250200, 250201, 250202, 250210, 250211, 250212, and resolution number 250214. Ms. Lawhead, will you please call the roll to take attendance?
Councilmember Scola. Councilmember Gautier. Councilmember Jones. Councilmember Young. Councilmember Driscoll. Councilmember Lozada. Councilmember Bass. Councilmember Phillips. Councilmember O'Neill. Councilmember Gilmore Richardson. Councilmember Thomas. Councilmember Harity. Councilmember Ahmad. Councilmember Landau. Councilmember Brooks. Councilmember O'Rourke. Council President Johnson.
Present. Thank you. A quorum of the committee is present, and this hearing is now called to order. Ms. Lawhead, will you please read the title of the resolutions?
Bill number 250195, an ordinance amending Chapter 19-1500 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Wage and Net Profits Tax by revising certain tax rates under certain terms and conditions. Bill number 250196, an ordinance adopting the operating budget for fiscal year 2026. Bill number 250197, an ordinance to adopt a fiscal 2026 capital budget. Bill number 250198, an ordinance to adopt a capital program for the 6 fiscal years 2026 through 2031 inclusive. Bill number 250199, an ordinance amending Chapter 19-2600 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Business Income and Receipts Taxes to revise tax rates and end certain exclusions from the tax on receipts, all under certain terms and conditions. Bill number 250200, an ordinance amending Chapter 12-1000 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Traffic Code to revise the fee for the use of parking meters, all under certain terms and conditions. Bill number 250201, an ordinance amending Chapter 19-1800 of the Philadelphia Code entitled School Tax Authorization to provide for an increase in the tax that the Board of Education of the School District of Philadelphia is authorized to impose on real estate, and amending Chapter 19-1300 entitled Real Estate Taxes to establish an equivalent reduction in the tax rate for the city real estate tax, all under certain terms and conditions. Bill number 250202, an ordinance amending Section 19-1806 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Authorization of Realty Use and Occupancy Tax to eliminate certain exemptions, all under certain terms and conditions. Bill number 250210, an ordinance amending Section 10-1001 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Fees of Commissioner of Records to increase the portion of fees for the recording of deeds and mortgages and related documents to be used for housing trust fund purposes under certain terms and conditions. Bill number 250211, an ordinance amending Chapter 19-1400 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Realty Transfer Tax by revising the rate of the tax, all under certain terms and conditions. Bill number 250212, an ordinance to amend Chapter 19-4400 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Development Impact Tax to end imposition of the tax under certain terms and conditions. Resolution number 250214, resolution providing for the approval by the Council of the City of Philadelphia of a revised 5-year financial plan for the City of Philadelphia covering fiscal years 2026 through 2030 and incorporating revisions with respect to fiscal year 2025, which is to be submitted by the mayor to the Pennsylvania Intergovernmental Cooperation Authority pursuant to an intergovernmental cooperation agreement by and between the city and the authority.
Today, we will continue the public hearing of the Committee of the Whole to consider the bills read by the clerk that constitute proposed operating and capital spending measures for fiscal year 2026, a capital program and a forward-looking capital plan for fiscal year 2026 through fiscal year 2031. This morning, we will hear testimony regarding the Housing Opportunities Made Easy, which is known as the HOME Initiative, and this afternoon, we will hear testimony from Merle Arts. Ms. Lawhead, will you please call the first panel to testify?
Tiffany Thurman, Chief of Staff for Mayor Parker.
Good morning, everyone. Ms. Thurman, just state your name for the record. Please
Tiffany
begin your
Thurman.
testimony.
Tiffany Thurman, Chief of Staff to Mayor Sherelle L. Parker. Good morning, Council President Johnson and members of City Council. Thank you for inviting us back to testify about the Housing Opportunities Made Easy, AKA HOME Plan. We hope the materials shared since the last hearing on April 23rd were helpful, and we look forward to discussing this issue further today. As Mayor Parker stressed during her special address, the City of Philadelphia, like many other cities across the country, is facing a housing crisis. The broad agreement on this amongst experts, practitioners, and elected officials across the political spectrum is striking. The impacts of the housing crisis are felt by many of our constituents. We hear from them consistently. Those voices are saying the same thing. We have a housing crisis, and we must act now. The data only reinforces the point and the urgency. We estimate Philadelphia is short as many as 17,000 housing units in key areas across the city. Unless we take bold steps to address this, thousands of Philadelphians will not have access to safe, affordable, quality housing. As we discussed previously, and as you know, a massive portion of the city's housing stock is old, getting older, and in desperate need of repairs. Nearly 500,000 units were built before 1960 and almost 300,000 before 1940. By our estimates, at least 21,000 of these need repairs and preservation. Meanwhile, the median home income price increased last year to $240,000, 37% higher than 2019. And the least expensive homes are up by 56%. Especially while interest rates have risen, household incomes aren't close to catching up, putting down payments and mortgage costs out of reach for many residents. Finally, the situation is dire for many renters. 3 in 10 are severely cost burdened, spending more than half their income on rent. For nearly a quarter of renters in this city, rent is consuming 30 to 50% of their income, leaving very little for other basic living necessities. The numbers paint a very clear picture. The need is great, and unless we take bold action, the situation will only worsen. While we outlined the framework and core pillars of the HOME Plan in the prior hearing, we want to stress again that its comprehensive design is intended to directly address the challenges that I just listed. This proposed plan will meet 78% of need for housing production and for preservation. Critically, this is in addition to PHA's 20,000 unit Open Doors initiative, ensuring that, especially for residents with lower incomes, we have enough quality, affordable housing across the city. Now, I know we're all considering this major initiative while other risks loom. We don't yet know what federal funding may be cut and where. We don't know how the economy will fare in the months ahead, but we've done our homework and we stand ready. Further, this is what we do know. This administration, the Parker administration, has always prioritized fiscal stability since day one, so that we can weather any storm while we're addressing the city's biggest challenges. We can afford this plan, but we cannot afford to wait. Experts across the Commonwealth and across this nation have all but verified, they have verified that time and again. In fact, during our conversation earlier this week with Robin Weissman, Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency, PHFA, she applauded how big and bold and comprehensive this plan is in light of what's happening at the federal level. She emphasized that the HOME Initiative is not only a housing plan, but an economic investment for Philadelphia. The $800 million bond fund from the city is a long-term investment where we will reap the rewards of revitalized neighborhoods and new revenue for years and years and years and years to come. This is a bold investment, but Philadelphia is not alone. In this uncertain fiscal environment, other major cities such as Chicago, Baltimore, Columbus, Atlanta, Austin, Raleigh, Kansas City, and San Antonio are issuing bonds to pay for essential housing investments and programs as well. The HOME Plan is not just a bond plan. It's a comprehensive approach that involves supporting existing programs, building new programs to fill in gaps, in fact, craters, policy and legislation, process improvement we're focusing on, leveraging the city's investment with private capital. We want to make sure that we keep front and center the fact that the home plan is a multifaceted and comprehensive approach that will change the way we do business as a city, not just a pot of funds. Fortunately, despite these challenges, Philadelphia has several significant advantages in tackling our housing crisis, the foremost being the commitment from the administration and this city council, unions, developers, the philanthropic community, and numerous other stakeholders in facing this crisis head on, leading from the front. We will not piecemeal this plan. What we're presenting to you today is comprehensive because that's what this crisis calls for. Thank you again, Council President and members of Council, for your time and for this opportunity to come back and talk more about this plan.
Thank you, Tiffany, and welcome back. Good to see all of you as well as we move the city of Philadelphia forward. Just have a couple questions before I turn it over to my members. So let's talk about the $800 million borrowing, the bond. Could Rob DeBoe please come up?
Absolutely.
How you doing, Rob?
All right, how are you?
I'm doing great.
Good.
And we're going to walk and chew bubblegum as we make sure that we're fiscally sound and also address the housing crisis that we have here in the city of Philadelphia. And so, Rob, just for the record, just to frame the conversation, give us an overview of the debt service that we're going to be paying over the lifetime of the $800 million borrowing of the bond. And then also how much we're going to be paying the total and then also each year.
Got it. Okay. So our plan is to do two borrowings of approximately $400 million each. Each borrowing will have debt service in the $33 to $35 million range. We're planning to do them tax exempt, taxable, so that we have more flexibility in how we spend the money. Over the life of the bonds, the total debt service would be a little over $1.3 billion.
1.3 billion, and
Yep.
how many years is that?
20 years.
It's going to take to buy that back.
20 years.
20 years?
Yep.
So that's 20 years into the future we'll be paying back on the $800 million.
Right, which is-
stuff. So we're borrowing $800 million to pay back $1.3 billion in the future.
That's right. And as
Okay,
with all
just
of
wanna
our
get clarity
borrowings,
on
this is kind of typical for our borrowings. They're usually 20 years, and there's always interest. You're always paying interest because, you know, the amount that the debt service you're paying 20 years from now isn't worth as much to someone as if you
On
pay it all
average,
back now.
how much will we be paying on interest?
So the interest varies by year.
You're an expert and you've been around for a while and put a lot of these deals together. So give us an average on the $1.3 billion that we have to pay back, the interest.
Yep. So if it's about $500 million over 20 years, so it's about $25 million a year. But it varies by year.
About $25 million a year
Yep.
and $500 million,
Over the 20 years.
$500 million
Yep.
over the 20 years. And also, currently, separate from this particular proposal,
And again, just to emphasize, that is standard for all our borrowings. They all have
Okay.
interest. They all get paid back over about 20 years.
well, that's where I'm going at now. And
Yeah.
so, because you're a chief finance guy, in terms of what's the total number of debt service that we have now, just as a city? I know we did a borrowing under MPI, we did another borrowing under Rebuild, but just give us overall.
Sure. So our existing debt service, throw in everything, is about $570 million for FY26.
And so could you calculate that $570 million over the 20-year period in the event that we approve the Homes Initiative? Will that number go down?
Yes. Our number
On
goes
average,
down
how much?
substantially after FY29. As we've talked about before, we have those pension obligation bonds, and the payments for them go down.
I want to not so much the pension, I want to just focus just on the debt service.
Oh, no, but that's part of the debt service.
That's part of the debt
Yep.
service,
So
okay.
when that goes down substantially, our overall debt service goes down, and even including the debt service on these bonds, our debt service will be much lower in the future than it is now.
So the debt service on the pension bonds is also included on other bonds that
On
we
all
use,
of
such
our
as
debt service.
MPI, such as...
That's right.
Could you separate that from us? Could you separate the pension bonds versus other bonds that we borrowed
Yep,
on,
yep,
such
we
as
can-
MPI, such as Rebuild, and the other key initiatives that we introduced? It's just for the
What
record.
we can do is we can give you our general obligation debt service. We can give you then the debt service. So Rebuild and NPI go through authorities. We can give you our authority debt service, and then we can give you the pension obligation bond debt service.
And so if we're paying $1.3 billion over 20 years from now, can you give us the overview of the strategy? And I like that this is an investment. That's what the
That's right.
presentation said, and other cities has done that. What is our, how are we going to grow revenue to pay this money back for those who are going to incur this debt in the future?
Yep.
I think
So-
my son is 10 now, so well, he'll be 30 then, and so we'll probably have children in public schools around that time and
Right.
utilizing city services. So just want to make sure that we're fiscally sound and
Yep.
we're doing the right thing in terms as we address, because it is a housing crisis.
That's right.
Just want to make sure that in terms of, as some may say, kicking the can down the road, right? And that's not what we're doing, right?
No. So-
we're going to figure out. So I'm assuming there's a strategy to bring in that revenue to pay down.
Yeah, so a couple of things. You would issue bonds when you think something is a long-term investment, right? And when you see a long-term payoff. And there's really nothing that's more of a long-term investment than housing. It's why people take out mortgages. So this is something that really fits with what a borrowing should be for, because there is that long-term payoff. When we look at how this is structured and the fact that our debt service will actually be lower going forward, overall debt service, than it is now. That means that it can fit within our revenue streams because we're actually, what we're projecting now is lower debt service than we have today.
Okay, so it will be lower debt service in the future than we are now, so we'll spend less.
Yes.
And that's based off of what analysis?
That is based off of the debt service schedules for all our outstanding debt and the debt that we are contemplating in this 5-year plan.
And have we, throughout this process, have we ever considered not using the bond? Have we ever thought about utilizing
So-
money from our general fund to invest in the housing to pay down our debt service?
Yeah.
So just thinking about different ways of addressing it.
Yeah, we do a substantial amount of pay-go, paying for things out of operating, and that has actually meant, particularly for our general obligation borrowing, the borrowing we do for rec centers, police, we've been able to do more of that with pay-go and less from a general obligation borrowing, which has enabled us to make our overall bond deals smaller and have further time in between them.
Okay.
So that has helped lower our debt service over time.
And just in regards to, and I'm gonna wrap up, and paying back the money over the 20-year period, again, that's the $1.3 billion. Are you gonna provide, I know you say when we do these long-term investment, there's gonna be a level of job growth that will pay for the debt service, help us generate additional revenue to take care of other services that we have to provide in the future. So I think what, Mr. Ira Goldstein, are y'all gonna give us analysis of where that job growth is gonna come from so we have an idea of how we're gonna pay down this debt service in the future? And then the last part is, I know your initial analysis in front of this body said there's zero job growth projection over the next 5 years in the 5-year plan. So is that gonna change at some point in time?
Yeah, and one of the reasons that we make the investments we make in not just this investment, but all the investments we make in the economy is to try to spur growth so that we'll see more job growth. That's the long-term goal, is to grow the city.
Like tax investments as well, right?
Exactly.
I think that's a part of it.
Yes,
We're on the same page there. And again, I'm just asking these questions as we move forward.
I appreciate it.
Through us reviewing and going over the documents as a unit, these questions come up and people want to make sure we're making a responsible decision on behalf of the taxpayers. And so it's my responsibility to ask these questions. We talk about partnering with the unions and getting $200 million worth of private capital, which I think is great from a public-private partnership. Just reiterate the individuals we are anticipating having these partnerships with. Any event that these partnerships don't come to fruition, because again, we're also working in an environment of uncertainty, right? One day we're dealing with this issue in terms of the financial stability of our city and our country, and the next day we're dealing with something different. And so people can change at the whim, right? Give us an idea of, separate from the unions, who these other partnerships would be. Any event that they do not move forward, what's our plan B?
So we worked with, well, on day one, when the mayor signed the executive order, we had unions stand with us. We had leaders like Robin Weissman, who I mentioned earlier from PHFA, to stand with us, as well as, leaders across the philanthropic space. So those leaders we are in active conversation with, we have proposals for, and we're waiting to hear back from. But we have no reason to believe that the additional $200 million, outside of the $800 million, that we won't raise that funding through philanthropic support, the support from the unions, and also funding from our state, from the Commonwealth. And we also haven't nixed out or we're still looking to receive funding from the federal side as well. But in terms of the specifics, I think beyond that, Rob, you want to talk through? Okay, yeah.
Okay. All right. Give me an idea in regards to the MPI team, Neighborhood Preservation Initiative. We all worked on it, including the mayor. What's its role as we move forward with the home initiative? I've received that conversation from every last member of council. What is our role in participating in such a project? The last administration didn't have a bold vision around housing, and so we led as a body and came up with MPI to address the housing infrastructure and housing crisis in the city of Philadelphia. It's great that we have a mayor that has a vision to address this issue, but we want to also make sure that the work that we have done continues and working in partnership with the administration. So what does it look like? I know Jesse has met with Janae Mumford and team, but give us an overview of the role that council will play in terms of MPI 2.0.
So one of the things that we often talk about is our Parkerisms, right? Not pitting the have against the have-nots, but we also have Johnsonisms too. And one Johnsonism is that we can walk and chew gum at the same time. Okay, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. And so we've had really, really great relationship and healthy, working partnerships with Janae Munford, who you mentioned, as well as Eleanor Sharp and other leaders on your technical staff. In terms of the specifics around MPI, I'll turn it over to Jesse. But I did want to affirm for the record, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. And we stand ready to continue our partnership with City Council. It is a successful program, no doubt. Our commitment to driveways, that doesn't go away with this plan, right? It's enhanced by this plan.
And I will say this for the record. Early on when I did talk on the mayor when we had our meeting, she said, give us an idea of all of those things that's the interest of members. And thus far they are in here. We'll look at the details in terms of how, what type of funding is allotted to what particular areas.
Yes.
I think some of those things will work out, but still just want to be on a record on what that looks like in terms of our partnership.
And I appreciate that, Council President Johnson. And we have had really, I would say, very healthy and productive meetings individually with council members around the home plan and MPI. Mention the driveways and alleyways. I see you over there clapping.
That's the Northwest thing,
Dr.
them
Phillips.
alleyways.
So, yes.
Yeah. But just to expand on that, the ability to look at MPI as a precedent for what we're doing has been beneficial to us because it's really set the stage for the array of programs that we're presenting. More than half of what we're proposing here is existing programs, things that we're looking to continue, things that we're looking to invest and or expand in. I think that we have looked at the quantification for the dollar amounts that have been spelled out in the proposal, and a lot of that has been predicated on past budgeting for a lot of the programs and meeting the marks here. So I think that MPI has definitely been a good metric for us, understanding where things might be oversubscribed and undersubscribed when it comes to the funding aspect of it all. But the intention here is to keep on having that same channel of communication open when it comes to home. I would imagine that, the same technical staff that we spoke to when it comes to MPI would be the same technical staff that we'd coordinate with when it comes to home. and as we go on forward, even as we leave today, we totally want to make sure that we keep that channel of communication open as we figure out how to dive in and refine, where you all are seeing some room for refinement.
Give me an overview when we talk about MPI. We spent roughly $157 million over 24 months. And so I know the home plan is asked, you're going to borrow 400 and then 400, right? And then obviously the goal was to do the first 30,000 units of preservation of building homes and the preservation of infrastructure, right? Give me the timeline. And then also we would like for you to provide broken down by units, also broken down by program expenditures and support.
Okay. Well, we can probably prepare something a little more expansive that spells out the timeline across the 50-some-odd programs. But for us, it's really getting started immediately, right, where we can. There are obviously some existing programs that are, concurrent with what we want to do, and we want to make sure that we have those conversations again. We're still talking about what that last tranche of spending for MPI looks like, right? And understanding that you all have a specific dedication to that, but understanding that there are funds that have been allocated in previous tranches for the programs that we're presenting, understanding where, that taps out and where we can come in. I think we're open to still be very much engaged when it comes to the timeline conversation. When it comes to the production or the everything that we're looking to yield and produce, I think that we have produced a breakdown of where each one of the programs is going to yield certain units and all of that that detail. All of that's been provided to the body in the form of a letter that spells out where the targets exist and how they're breaking up. But when it comes to the target of what we're trying to do here, we've quantified the need. We've quantified the need based on preservation and production. And what we're looking at is that when it comes to the 30,000, that breakdown is going to speak to 78% of both of those needs. So, we're prepared to adjust accordingly, monitor it, we're tracking it. It will be over the next 4 years, but at the same time, we'll be active.
4 years?
Mayor's
goal was her first term, we're going to get 30,000 used in preservation.
It'll be
building of housing, so the onus is on you to get to work.
We understand that, but we've mapped this out based on the borrowings over the next couple of years. But again, within the first term, we intend to hit the targets. Yeah.
Now, my favorite organization over there, Land Bank. Yeah, here you go, Angel Rodriguez. I know we had last time we talked, and I know the chief of staff is going to make sure we get it done because he has to be on steroids to make sure we hit the ground running to reach those goals. I can hear Jamie Gaultier in my ear now, like, let's get ready to rock and roll. So just give us a brief overview, and if Madam Chief of Staff said it shall be done, it's going to get done, but just talk about the study and then the ramping up of staff to make sure that we get rid of as much public land as possible through the turnkey programs and other various initiatives that we're going to be addressing. And then also I want to add, we did a town hall in the Northwest, and we talked about, there are middle neighborhood constituents out there who came and spoke about MPI and the need to make sure that we're addressing everyone's issues, and a very unique concept they asked if we could bring back to you as you roll out just home initiatives was the request for us to also look at, I think they call flats, the type of housing where seniors don't need to go up and down the steps anymore, but if we could take that in consideration of our overall toolbox of housing that shall be available. That was something that was actually asked of us. But just give us an overview on the land bank strategy to expand, the land bank strategy to go land bank 2.0, to get rid of as much land as possible, and to develop as much land as possible so we can hit that 30,000 unit target.
So there's two big sprints with the land bank, and one thing I did share with my colleague Angel Rodriguez was that I was not going to speak for a lengthy period of time as if he were not in the room, because he's here. But we're really excited to talk about the commitment that we have to the land bank as the administration. And so in the first sprint, we're looking inwardly. We want to make sure that the complement of staff meets the strategy. And so we're assessing the current state. That strategic plan will be complete before July 1 and will ensure that of the 32 positions that we have budgeted, that complement of staff supports the needs of the land bank. So that will be done by this summer. Then there's a longer term plan, which Jesse spoke to on the record when we were here last time. That's more longer term, and that's looking at further assessments outside of, or it's looking more at service delivery. And so I'll turn it over to Jesse, then Angel, to talk more about what that strategic process is gonna look like and the RFP that we discussed when we were here last time.
So just to codify, just to back up and talk about that strategic plan. So the strategic plan is actually, it's RFP that's closing, making sure we're getting some sort of vendor to be able to perform that. And that will actually be we'll have the contract for that. We'll have that in place to actually roll out and begin rolling out by July 1st. So we'll work toward actually, doing the work that the vendor or the contractor, consultant, would have to do to actually put together that strategic plan. That plan is actually going to incorporate, or it's going to require some steps along the way when it comes to council sitting in front of you and having you all, vote on it or, review it to the extent that those processes are required here. So that's not necessarily completed by July 1st, but we have somebody in play that's actually going to put that together. Now, what happens, that strategic plan is basically going to look at the strategy specifically around acquisition and disposition. It's going to actually bump up how the land bank does its business when it comes to focusing on certain areas, where it should ramp up its target approach, where it should look to prioritize certain end uses, whether it's affordable housing or open space or gardens, whatever the case may be. But we want that strategic plan to respond to the times now versus when it was last done in and around 2016. The operational assessment, which we took heed to, that's been bumped up, and we intend that to actually be completed by July 1 and actually be in place. And that operational assessment is going to look at how the organization actually conducts itself in terms of businesses, looking at the way that, we can respond to things that we came out of the hearing on October 30th of last year, thinking about how the disposition policy may play a role in the ability for the public to do business through the land bank. But that's also in addition to the steps that we've already taken in terms of, looking at the land bank board itself, putting a website out that is a little bit more user-friendly and something that's much more clearer on what the availability of property is. And I'll turn it over to Angel, who's had a chance to look at that organizational assessment scope.
Angel Rodriguez, Land Bank. Thank you for the opportunity. Good morning, everybody. When speaking to the administration, I was really happy to hear that there's going to be a bifurcated assessment, one internally thinking about operations, and then obviously going back to the strategic plan, which we've done previously, talking about how land should be used across the city and getting input from community and other stakeholders throughout the city. With the internal piece, I think it's important to note, and what I'm excited about with this evaluation is that the land bank is neither a panacea nor the catch-all for every ill in land disposition. It works in an environment and an ecosystem. We can do certain things and then we have to hand off to other agencies. So when Tiffany talks about DPD's budget, a lot of people forget that land bank is a part of DPD's budget, and that we're looking at how do we restructure those allotments of personnel across the board, because while the land bank can approve a project, can get it through the board, can get it to council and get council approval, we need the help of zoning. We need the help of LNI. We need the help of, all the inspectors. We need PICO's help and all of that. So when you see a delay or something's not happening or assistance to developers, nascent developers, like we did with the Minority Developer Program, that requires partnerships. The problem is, the issue being obviously the land bank's the front door. So how do we tease that out and how do we really explain that and then fund where we need to fund? So we're really excited about engaging in this process and getting it done by July 1. So everybody has a better understanding of the process, but also kind of rewrite that narrative so that it better fits and dovetails into the larger strategic plan. And that way we can actually ramp up and we'll know where we should be funding appropriately.
Okay, great.
That way, we will ensure that come October 30th?
30th, Scorpio season.
Yes, long before October 30th, sir.
Okay.
Long before October 30th.
Thank you very much. Great, turn over to my members.
President?
Councilman,
Yes,
just one
sure.
other thing. It's been mentioned that we have 2 vacant positions. I just want to let everybody else know.
You have 2
that
vacant positions available?
At the land bank.
Okay.
One unintended consequence by what's happening on the federal level, prior to this date, we were not getting qualified applicants. I can say that now, just recently looking at what we're having. Unfortunately, because other places are contracting, we're getting better candidates. So we'll be able to fill those positions soon.
Okay, cool. Just last question for Mr. DeBoe. I want to go back to the 1.3 billion over 20 years, right? I just want to also just recommend with your team, I know y'all work with the reinvestment fund, just if somebody going to do an analysis to show how we recoup the investment to pay down on that debt service that we're going to be paying over the 20 years?
Yeah, and the payoff is kind of more than just dollars and cents, right? For something like this, it is the fact that we're addressing the housing crisis in Philadelphia, and people will have homes, and they will pay taxes on those homes, right? So that will benefit us. But yeah, we can
I
give
believe
you
you.
benefits.
I'm just saying, is there anything in writing to say this is how we're going to get a return on our investment? Even if it's, I'm not going to say hypothetically, just from a data-driven standpoint, right? Okay, we know off the top, we know the unions within themselves.
Yep. Yeah, we can
We
get
know
you
for a
something.
fact
and-
they're going to get a significant amount of jobs.
Yep.
We know contractors are going to have the opportunity to participate. That's going to drive revenue. Just in the event that when we responding and folks will say, well, you're borrowing 1.3 billion, right, to basically do a bond on 8 million, right? Okay,
800.
800 million for the record. How are you going to pay for it, right? And I say, well, you're going to have more people in housing, right? More people who have housing. We're going to address the issue of homelessness. That takes away from the draw off our system social service-wise, right?
There'll be construction jobs.
Yes,
yeah.
exactly. But it'll probably also be, it's good to have anecdotal data to say, okay, here's what this looks like. And I know you have one of the foremost experts who are sitting with you to be able to say, okay, here's what that looks like. At least I would think that would make this body, for at least the fiscally, the individuals who are, and individuals who want to make sure we're making a sound fiscal decision. That's all.
Understood.
So we're going to be looking for that type of data as we go through this process. And I know the clock is moving between now and June, but we may be here for a session or two beyond. I would like to get it done sooner than later. And so that type of information. And also the total debt service that the city of Philadelphia has separate from this, just in general. But I want you to separate it from the actual pension obligations to other debt service
Yeah.
that we had that's not
Yeah.
pension.
And just to be clear, that pension obligation bond is debt service. That was a
No,
borrowing.
I know it is,
Yeah.
but like how we did MPI, how we did rebuilds, those type of concrete initiatives that doesn't deal with
Yep.
the health and welfare of individuals. Did I make clarity from that aspect? Is
Yeah,
that part
we
clear?
get you that breakout.
Okay,
Yeah,
so that's more clear. I'll say brick and mortar, put it that way. Investments versus health and well-being of individuals. That would be helpful as well.
okay, got it.
Thank you very much. The chair recognizes the chair of housing to lead the discussion, Councilman Jamie Gautier.
Thank you, Council President. Good morning to all of you. Thank you for being here to continue this critically important discussion. My first set of questions are around home repairs. Thank you so much for all the data your team provided that relates to enrollment and demand for our home repair programs. It was incredibly helpful in showing just how popular these programs are and how high the need is. In fact, I'd say this data really emphasizes what many of my colleagues and I were saying at the last hearing about how expanding basic systems repair eligibility without a commensurate increase in budget and support infrastructure runs the risk of paralyzing the program. I'll note a few numbers that jumped out to me. First, we have over 10,000 people who expressed interest in either BSRP, Adoptive Mod, or Built to Last last year who were not accepted Further proof on how popular these programs are. We have over 10,000 people who expressed interest in these programs who were not accepted, and only about 9% of them were turned away because of income over eligibility. This means that demand is already huge, even within the current confines of the program. Second, census data shows that the number of eligible homeowners would literally double if the income terms are increased to 100% AMI. Third, even when all of PHDC outreach materials say that 60% AMI is the income cap, as they do today, still almost 600 people who were over income tried to apply anyway. Depending on how much work they need done, that's $10 million in new repair costs at least, which already surpasses the FY26 budget proposal. That's before we as a city government publicly announced that the eligibility has increased. Again, I admire the intent here. I agree with the mayor that we don't want to turn away people who are a nickel over the income eligibility, but it does feel like we need to consider a more subtle solution to avoid paralyzing BSRP with too much demand. And so I wanted to ask, was any thought given to a waiver process or some method of special consideration for households that would be over 60% AMI, but that would still give them the opportunity to make their hardship case to PHDC? Perhaps that higher income households receive certain types of repairs, but not other types of repairs. And this is local money, and so it's not as restrictive as some of our other sources of funding, like our federal funds. So we have the ability to be flexible, and we have the ability to be creative. And so how much have you thought of these more nuanced types of solutions so that we as a city are not offering a program to tens of thousands of newly eligible homeowners that we know we don't have the funding for? It sounds like we could meet the mayor's goal without wholesale increasing the program eligibility to 100% AMI.
One of the questions that you asked, Councilmember Gaultier, is how much have we thought about it? We've thought about it day and night, since it definitely long before the transition, but definitely during the transition when we brought together all of the experts, including some of those that are referenced or that help to, the people that are for what you're saying. What our approach is saying is that it's not an either or proposition, it is a both and proposition. It is a pro-growth proposition. It is to say that we're thinking about all Philadelphians across the spectrum. We're thinking about teachers, police, firefighters that would not have access but for the provisions in this program, as well as, and people who have aspirations for home ownership and who need help with renting, as well as the folks that you mentioned in your opening. And I appreciate the reference to the data points that we provided, because though it is those data points that substantiate our approach. I'll kick it over to my colleague Jesse now to provide more information and more responding to your specific questions. And then of course, Dave Thomas, head of PHDC.
Yeah, I mean, just before I kick it over to Dave, I do want to clarify that there is a difference between expressions of interest and actual cases that made it past that threshold review. One of the things that are kind of prevalent in the EOI process is that they are literally substantiating the ability to say that they actually live in the home, that they could qualify for something like this. So I mean, that is a cut in the process that we want to make sure that we are taking advantage of. In terms of the cases, that is the caliber, the amount of cases that you see canceled within that category are surely on the fact of the matter is that it's an application process, so there are boxes to be checked on the applicant side. So being able to evidence financial documentation and things that represent your ability to qualify for something is important to the process. So, we recognize that there's always an opportunity to think about how the application process could be better and could be easier, but I do want to make sure that there is a distinction between expressions of interest and actual cases canceled. And I'll kick it over to Dave to talk about the strategy.
I think what I'm saying might be missed. What I'm saying is we have an extremely popular program where even limiting it to 60% AMI we are spending millions of dollars on it. And even if we took into account those who expressed interest over the income eligibility, that would have been a huge amount spent. And so if we go out, and right now we're getting those expressions of interest while the program materials say 60% AMI. If we go out and now say 100%, based on the people that are in the city, we're talking about literally doubling the program. At the same time, the allocation that has been proposed by you all doesn't account for that. It does not account for that level of growth. And so what I'm asking you very specifically to respond to is if we can meet the goal of helping people who are just over the eligibility in a way that is more subtle than completely opening up the program. Can we have a waiver process for people that make more than 60% AMI? Can we have a set of repairs, but maybe not the full set for people who make over 60% AMI? Are there ways to still meet our goal of serving a variety of people that are both low income and working class without doubling the amount of people that are applying for the program and going into that knowing that we have not allocated enough money?
David Thomas, President, CEO, PHDC. Thank you for that question, Councilwoman. I want to start by saying, a couple of years ago when we increased the income eligibility from 150% of poverty, I was concerned about the amount of people that would apply. And that's when we took it to 50%. It didn't really change a lot of demand. And then we took it to 60, and I had that same fear again. And I think that number probably increased my demand by maybe 10%, if so. So I don't know that it's going to double my demand. I don't know that trying to create a waiver process would be the best approach, although I'm open to considering your thoughts and your ideas. But my concern would be making that program more subjective. And I don't want to make it subjective because then you're leaving it to our internal staff to make decisions that they should not be responsible for making. I mean, it should be a program that's for everyone. If the need is there.
Can I get a point of information though?
Yep.
Just for clarity on it? Because I wrestle with this a little bit myself, to be quite frank with you. And I probably have one of the most diverse districts as a district council member representing 15 different neighborhoods from Rittenhouse Square to Packer Park, from Point Breeze to Eastwick. So I have to also make sure I'm balancing my policy approaches to support everybody. But I know the argument has always been if a person makes a little bit more, a little bit, what is a little bit more? Is it 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, 30,000? And I'm not even asking that question for the clap, but I wrestle with it because I remember when we did AVI and a sweet little Italian woman who lives in Packer Park came to me about her real estate taxes increasing, and she's on a fixed income. And she was only maybe $200, $300, $400 over the criteria for the senior citizens tax freeze and was literally crying. So from that point forward, I knew I had to figure out a way to support her, and she shouldn't be penalized for making a few dollars above the actual income guidelines. So who would clarify what does that guideline be in terms of how much an individual, because the difference is really, if we be real, the difference is a person who has to make a decision between getting their roof fixed, right, or paying their mortgage. But then you may have another person who may be, well, I can get the roof fixed, I can go to Cancun and then still apply for this program to get my roof fixed, but maybe not go to Cancun and just get your roof fixed, if that makes sense in terms of comparing the two individuals. The chair releases time back to Councilman Jamie Gauthier, because I do struggle with that to try to figure out, we're not just doing a giveaway to some folks who just, I mean, our job is to really advocate for everybody, but as my colleague O'Rourke said, we also have to advocate and make sure we're fighting for the least of these, right? And so that's a part of how I approach it as well.
Dave, we've talked a lot about this program. I know it's your baby. And I've heard you say on numerous occasions that we're getting, I think, $1 million a week in applications for this program, with the program at 60% AMI. I'm going to push back on the notion that if we go out into the city and say, you can have a free $25,000 grant, no matter how much you make, no matter who you are, to repair your home, that there's not going to be a lot of interest in that. That defies what we've been seeing with respect to this program. And so we talked a little bit earlier about fiscal responsibility, and I'm going to say that fiscal responsibility is more than just about books and accounting. It's also using your resources to make the biggest impact and using your resources when where they are most needed. I think it would be irresponsible to go into this knowing that we're not allocating enough money, but at the same time literally doubling the people who will apply. And so I agree with the mayor that we don't want to pit the have-nots against the have-a-littles, but I also think we want to be really smart about using our resources where they're most needed with an incredibly popular and vital program. Thank you.
And I'd just like to add to that, we don't think that looking at income alone really quantifies the actual need. So I think that, it's important to us to, let the power be in actual targeted outreach and as we look at these increases across the board. So it's important for us to do the work to make sure that we're still responding to the need as a whole, but at the same time managing the ability to expand. So we do recognize that there needs to be a refined approach to this and needs to be some sort of accounting for what the dollar amount responds to, but that's why what we're going forward with will make sure that we look at eligibility with a fine-tooth comb.
We can meet both of our goals. I really do. I'm just asking for a different way of approaching this.
But to suggest that we're not going to be fiscally responsible is also very irresponsible. To also suggest that we haven't looked at our homework and haven't thought about those eligibility requirements, or just we're unfurling the sails to anyone and everyone that applies, is also very irresponsible. That's the wrong narrative that is put out there. That is not our mantra. That is not how we work. When we look at eligibility, when we look at income, and we talked about this before, student loan debt, let's start and stop right there. Healthcare costs, number 2, and on and on and on. There are a number of factors that we're looking at in addition to that, and I just think it's very, very dangerous to put a false narrative out there of something that the Parker administration didn't proffer and didn't say.
Please don't confuse my comments. Please don't confuse my comments. We just went through a pretty long back and forth about the bond issuance, about the amount of time, about how encumbered the city would be even after the mayor has left. And I'll be very transparent with you. I want to spend $800 million on housing. All I'm offering is not to suggest that the Parker administration is fiscally irresponsible, but that a part of fiscal responsibility is not just looking at the accounting, but looking at where we are making investments, making sure that we are getting the most bang for our buck, and making sure that we're supporting the people in the city that most need our support. And I'm also not suggesting that you haven't looked at the numbers. I assume you have, but the proposal that we received proposes to double the amount of applicants without adding a commensurate amount of investment. And I think that's something that we have to work on together.
The proposal suggests that we meet the need, that we address real needs that we currently aren't addressing, and that we meet the moment with the crisis that we're currently experiencing, and that we do not remain in last place when it comes to our economic mobility, which, by the way, over the last decade, we have slipped to last place. That's why this plan is comprehensive. That's why it meets the moment. I know that Dave Thomas has been asking to.
Because could somebody answer my question now?
Yep. I'm gonna qualify.
Wait, 1 second. And again, because I'm not getting to the whole narrative about pitting the have and the have-nots, because I hear that and sometimes it comes across to me as just good rhetoric and jargon. The legitimate question is, though, right, is if we're raising the AMI to 100%, right, and again, at least for clarity for myself, I just want to get an understanding that we're supporting those most in need, and if we're going to support somebody else who have a little bit more than those who just have a little bit less, right? what does that number look like? Or are we still working on that number? At least for me, in layman's terms, I'm trying to understand that part. And again, is it a person that makes $5,000 more than the income guideline, $10,000 more than the income guideline, or $20,000 more than the income guideline? Because I think that would kind of crystallize, at least for me, how we're supporting people who want to utilize the program that may not meet the income guidelines as it currently is, since we're going to increase it.
Yeah, so for your question, sir, the guidelines would change of about $30,000, roughly.
Okay.
Okay?
All right.
But I also want to qualify a couple.
So the person that makes 70,000, or I'm gonna bring the number down. A person that makes 40,000, now a $70,000 person can participate in the program.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, for me, that was just real simple
Yep.
response.
Also, I want to qualify a couple things because it's not just income that deems eligibility. It's the need.
Yeah, Jesse said that. He just
Yeah,
said we
it is
take
the
other
need.
things beside.
I probably turned down more people because they didn't have a need than I turned down more people for any other thing, because people just want us to spend money, like you just said, unnecessarily. But we're trying to focus on emergencies. We're trying to take care of as many people that have a need as we can take care of. So, and that emergency does not, as we talked about, does not stop at the low income level. I do talk about people all the time, and yes, I do get calls from folks that are slightly over but have a great need. And we would love to address those needs, because at the end of the day, me addressing a roof does not only secure that family, but it takes care of that neighborhood. It takes care of that block. It takes care of that community. So I think that is something that we need to be focused on, because we're not just saving families, we're saving communities every day.
Just to put your question in further perspective, Council President, if you think about a family of three, a household of three, a single mom with 2 kids, that 60% threshold caps her ability to qualify for something at just under $75,000. And we think about how far $75,000 in a single family household goes right now. A single parent household goes right now. So, thinking about, that additional number that Dave talks about, that bumps it up to $100,000. And thinking about a two-parent household where, if it's 4 people, $71,000, that $71,000 becomes just over almost $120,000. So you're thinking about like the incomes that are coming in roughly about $50,000 or $60,000 paired eachly together. Like that quantum, that cancels people out. So being able to put it in that perspective is also our ability to look at the responses needed for families.
And so this is the process, and some of this is in public, so we still want to do a deeper dive before we pass the bill to shape what it looks like.
I think that it would be really good, and this is something that we could also offer up. It is within the deck, but the deck is over 100 pages, just talking about the debt-to-income ratio and other factors that we looked at that are so critically important, so that we're not just boxing ourselves in, looking at a metric that is important, but it doesn't tell the entire story.
I know y'all did your homework, so we've been doing it. We've done this rodeo before with the Sixers. I know y'all do your homework. I think it's just us as a body going to work with you to figure out what we're going to compromise on before we pass this bill. Absolutely. That we feel comfortable with in order to get us to the other side. So I'm going to move on to Councilmember Rulandau, then Councilmember, I'm sorry, you gave me the hand. Councilmember, it's Jim Harity, then Councilman Rulandau, then Councilman Nicholas O'Rourke. Point of information, Mr. Phillips from the Northwest, sir.
Yes, Council President. I just want to be helpful for this conversation. I think I heard the mayor say before that the reason why we're even looking into this more deeply when it comes to housing preservation has a lot to do with the 9th district, the 10th district, the 4th district, where individuals are working. And I just wanted to get clarity from you all. I was trying to find a number.
With all due respect, they working in the 2nd district too.
We're working, and they're working class. I didn't finish my statement.
We got working class people.
They're working class.
Wait,
what I'm trying to say is that I know they're all over. We got working class people in the 2nd district. But I'm saying that the model is, a lot of times these people, we don't, our areas don't get the opportunities, right, that in this capacity, because I'm just saying, what were the numbers? I just want to know the AMI for the 9th district, 10th district, and the 4th district. the average median? Do you have that on hand?
I mean, depending on the household size, you're talking about just over 60%, but you're below and just above 60%. Your average Philadelphian is about 57 to 58%, and those different constituencies represent your average Philadelphian. But
Well,
I mean,
if we're gonna go there on the AMI, then we might as well talk about the real cost of housing and making sure that the housing that we provide reflect the housing AMI of the people that live in the city of Philadelphia and not the area median income that the federal government says that. I mean, if we're gonna go down that road in terms of how these houses are gonna be sold to the people who wanna purchase them. So, but I do take the point that the gentleman from the 9th Councilmanic District is talking about in terms of the AMI, and we did do a town hall in his district, and people did come up and say, we're a middle neighborhood, and the mayor is a former member of this body, and she talks about middle neighborhoods. So we're gonna work it out in terms of our body and your body, and then we'll come up with a compromise that we all can agree on to make sure we're supporting those most vulnerable.
And that's our
But
approach.
for the member from Northwest to say that those are the only working class families in the city of Philadelphia.
Let me be very clear. We
I'm
are
just
not
messing
pitting
with
district against district. We
We
want to
just having
focus on the
fun.
whole spectrum.
We just having fun. And it's all in the spirit of moving the city of Philadelphia forward. So, Member Harity.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you all for coming today. You know, I'm the chair of labor and civil service, so I'm always concerned with the training of our workforce and the quite frankly, the money in our workforce's pocket. So I'm going to ask these three questions and for the sake of time, and then you guys can do what you got to do. What measures are in place to ensure that contractors hired for the Home Initiative meet responsible contracting standards and that all construction workers on these jobs are properly certified and qualified to do the work safely and professionally? You know, because of the collapse we had on 23rd and Market a few years back, we know that being certified and qualified to do a job means a lot. And then, how many homes will be built with prevailing wage, apprentice standards, and meet minority quotas? And then, lastly, given that I'm a union guy, so I know a little bit about the unions. Given that the union pension funds have a fiduciary responsibility, typically invest in large-scale building projects across the country. But they don't invest in back rent payments to landlords, minor home repairs, or removing roots or trees. How does the administration plan to align the goals of the Home Initiative with the investment criteria for these funds? Got quiet.
Good afternoon. Good morning still. Depends on the type of housing. In terms of that's being developed under the home plan, obviously low-income housing tax credit deals are all prevailing wage, which, you know, because of the agreement we have with the building trades, those are all union rates. We monitor those closely. We do have a robust, equal opportunity program where we are tracking, Philadelphia residency, making sure that contracts that are being engaged with developers and contractors who are, where are you buying your materials, that they're, engaging minority developers, women-owned businesses, and DBEs. But we're tracking those numbers. But usually large-scale, mid-size construction projects are all union rate. If you're talking about smaller projects, like say Turn the Key, where it's infill scattered site, typically the development is not union. Those are done, but it's still governed in terms of your question about quality work and safety work. We rely on the L&I to actually track the work and make sure that those standards are met. The other issue in terms of minority participation, we also do track those. Everybody is required to have an EOP plan, and we do track and make sure that they do that, and we do have recourse to stop a project if they are not meeting their goals in terms of those issues.
Okay, but how many homes out of the 30,000 do you average that are going to be there? So I know that we can't actually do this project by building 30,000 units. We're going to have to do some creative stuff in order to hit our numbers, and I'm all for that. I'm just trying to make sure that while we're doing it, we're keeping a standard together. I mean, just to walk on a job, a union laborer has to have a minimum of 10 hours OSHA training, and that's for their own good. We see what happens when people go on to job sites and they're not good, people die. That's just the reality. So I'm curious about that, and then if you could also just touch back on my last part of that question on how do you plan for the fact that the match of the unions will only pay for the large scales construction. They will not, they do not, in our normal investment for our pension funds, we don't normally invest in those smaller projects. So how do you separate that is what I'm trying to get at.
So the first question around the number of homes built with prevailing wage, we're still working on that. We will get that information to you. The second question around the training, workforce development, our commitment remains. We did not just have the unions to stand up with us in name only. We're a pro-union administration, so they are absolutely at the table, fully read in on the plan and supportive of it. Regarding the more technical question around the proposal and the pension fund, I'll turn it over to Rob.
Sure, thanks. So we've been having discussions with unions, and they're asking the same questions you are. So we're making sure that we can find a match that is the kind of investment that appeals to them, that meets their fiduciary responsibility, and that creates jobs. And we're optimistic we can do that. And as we committed to last time with the council president, as those discussions get further, we will loop in council to...
Point of information.
Yep.
I'm going to go there, but will they provide the administration their numbers on diversity, equity, and inclusion because they're going to be using taxpayer dollars to build in the city of Philadelphia? So will they provide you their numbers on what people of color are participating in the unions and their plan to make sure that they diversify as they move forward?
Not only that, so yes, but we also, if you remember just a few months ago when we put a proposal before you in working with the unions, that was reflected in that plan, the plan regarding the Sixers. So we've demonstrated our commitment to diversity, to equity.
I know your plan. I know your commitment.
Yes,
Ain't no
but
doubt
that
in my mind
commitment,
your
that commitment wasn't done in a vacuum. And so there is, the standard is the standard. And the standard doesn't change project by project. We have a commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. It is not just something beautiful to say, but look at our numbers now. We also have demonstrated that with...
Madam Chief of Staff,
Yes, sir.
not the commitment, because I know the commitment is going to be there, but also they should give you their numbers and say, this is what the makeup of our unions look like as of today. That should be a request from the administration in terms of an agreement as you move forward, that's all.
I was going to say yes, and
Okay.
We've demonstrated our commitment to this even with the new office that we have led by Nadir Jones.
I know your commitment.
But
Without
our
a shadow
commitment
of a doubt.
is our commitment, and if home is
Okay.
our plan, then that commitment doesn't change. Our partners then sign, if they're partnering with us,
So
they're
they
signing
want to
onto
give you
that
their
commitment.
numbers, they're showing you, they're opening their books and say, this what the demographics of diversity looks like, and all the unions we're going to do agreement with. Is that what you're saying for the record?
For the record, I'm saying that
Okay.
we have a commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the companies that we work with, the partners that we work with at the table, have to have that shared commitment if they're working with us.
That's not what I'm asking you. I'm not asking about the shared commitment. I'm not asking about the administration commitment. I'm asking about the individuals that you're going to engage in agreement in to use their funds to invest in the home initiative are going to give you, or have they submitted to you, their numbers of diversity as relates to their particular union.
And any organization that we work with, whether it's a union, philanthropic community, they have to have a shared commitment
asking you
to diversity,
just-
equity, and inclusion.
I'm asking you
But
just
if you
for the
have a
union.
specific question regarding the unions, we should then bring the unions here to make that, to answer that specifically.
No, you're doing the agreement, not me. You have to provide that information to us, and so when you get a chance, my official request is to provide their data to us, because this is what members will ask these questions, and so I'm just doing it for the record. And so the official request is that they provide you the data of the makeup of the particular unions, and that you provide that to the member of the chair, for members of the board. That's all.
Yeah, for
And
any
I-
union
and
that
this
we
is
work
not- and
with.
This is not questioning the administration's commitment. The chair recognizes Councilmember Gilmore Richardson.
Thank you, Council President, and I appreciate you bringing that up because that also came up at one of our town halls in the 9th Council District that we had last week, this exact question. And so as an addendum for clarification relative to the request, if we would be able to get at least copies of a memorandum of understanding or agreement as it relates
Absolutely.
to the home plan and the agreement with said partners that have been mentioned.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
See, we know your commitment, just letting you know, rocking and rolling. Where you going? You asked the question. The chair recognizes, it's your time. The chair recognizes Member Harity to finish up
Why I didn't leave, I was waiting to talk to you.
his line of questioning.
I'm sorry, and I thank you for that. But just along our council president's line too, again, as somebody that came from the construction union, one of the biggest hindrances for minority companies to be able to do these projects is the bonding process. Most of the smaller contractors, they have insurance, they have their contractor's license, they're fully prepared like that. But what catches them off guard when they try to even look at these kind of jobs is the bonding. They have to have a bond comparative of the work that they're going to do. Maybe how we really try to get more minorities involved is to figure out how we help them with that bonding process. Because a lot of these countries, they could definitely do the job. They just can't afford that initial bond. Now, they might be able to afford that initial bond halfway through the job when they get a payment. You know what I'm saying? But if we're really going to give it a shot or give it a chance, I believe that we also have to look at the bonding process and how we ask these companies to do this. Because, again, we have a lot of qualified minority companies in the city of Philadelphia. Finances is what gets us.
Absolutely, and through the new organizational structure that we have with our OEO department, led now under Nadir Jones, we're doing just that. That is actually a provision of this plan to look at bonding and contracting and any other barriers that we know that minority-owned firms have faced, right? So it's giving them those opportunities through with the right provisions in place and the right oversight in place, but through this plan. I don't know, Jesse, would you like to speak more to that?
No, I mean, that's it. I mean, we do call out the access to bonding in our plan. There are monies committed to that, and we understand that that is a barrier. And as we look at the barriers, that is one prime barrier for the not-so-prime developers that we want to make sure that we endorse here.
Exactly, and the council president was just trying to get to that, you know, these contractors that we're hiring, you know, we always have this thing where they say they're gonna hire from the neighborhood, they're gonna do this, they're gonna do that. This is a substantial investment. And if we are going to make this change and bring everybody on board, this is the time to do it, while we know this work is going to be available. So I thank you. Thank you.
And these lines of questioning is because in the event that we come to an agreement and we approve this $800 million borrowing, which is going to cost us $1.3 billion over 20 years. So if we agree to this, this is probably the most historical, significant
That's right.
investment that we've seen in a lifetime. And our role and responsibility, and before you say that the administration isn't thinking this way, I know y'all are, but we're thinking as well that we want to make sure that everybody get a chance to participate And because we're the largest poorest city in America, if we're going to do $1 billion investment, actually a $2 billion investment, then surely all boats have to rise with the tide in terms of generational wealth as a part of this. So that's what these lines of questioning are coming along. The union support me, but at the end of the day, it's about making sure those who are most vulnerable have a chance to participate. That hasn't been the case here in the city of Philadelphia. And so if they want in on this taxpayer investment initiative, then they got to put up and show up to make sure that this process is diverse and inclusive. And they, my friends, not tell them, and they can hear me and call later on, but it is what it is, and I stand on that, that's all.
Absolutely.
And I know the administration is standing on it as well.
Thank you, sir.
Got you on it. Councilman Rue Landau.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you all so much for being here. I echo so much of what my colleagues have said so far. Want to start by saying again, every time I get the mic when we talk about home, I am so excited about this potential transformational change that we're going to do with housing here in Philadelphia. I think if we can infuse $800 million in the right places in the city and the right programs in the city of Philadelphia, we can dramatically change people's lives and the way we're doing business here. So want to start by telling you how excited I am. I've got one comment, two questions. I'm getting them out first. My first comment, just to go back to basic systems repairs, again, to be very quick. If I remember correctly from your information, we take care of 2,500 houses per year, and there are now, as we hear, 10,000 applications of interest, which I'm assuming means a waiting list. I want to spend this money as smartly as possible and don't understand, this is just a comment, no need to reply to it. I would suggest we should clear our waiting list first and handle whoever else is in our current income bracket of 60% AMI, which is already quite high. But to gather the folks who are just above, who miss it, you can tweak that number of 60% without going up to 100% AMI, which are very, very high numbers at a household of 3 at $107,500. Just saying there's a way we can do this to capture more people to take care of exactly what basic systems repair was intended for. But those are not my questions. So, thank you. I have two questions. The first one is about housing preservation. The prior housing plan focused about 2/3 of its targets on housing preservation. We have all said, and the mayor says, that the most affordable home is the one that you're in right now. Can you provide detail, and maybe you can even share this in writing, what programs funded under the Home Initiative will fund housing preservation, and how many units they are expected to preserve? And how was this determination made to shift away from preservation, especially given that preservation is a core need for the city with so many affordable units? And my second question, different topic, is about research and consultant initiatives. By my count in the home program, there are 10 programs proposed, and 7 of them with funding attached to them that are research, consulting, assessments, outreach, or training initiatives. And they altogether add up to $4,560,000. So these are, for example, access to bonding for local contractors, contractor training, the earned income tax credit, land bank assessment, long-term 70/30 ground lease research, operational and programmatic efficiency assessment, positive housing marketing and engagement, the rent to credit program research, restore, repair, renew impact report, and workforce development. So my questions here is, what was the decision-making process around determining that these initiatives were better funded through the home bond issuance rather than through the general fund? And was an assessment made about any of these that they could be accomplished by existing staff just in their job duties and under current funding levels rather than the new resource and outside consultants. Thank you so
So
much.
broadly speaking, the capacity is not, we don't have the capacity. If we did, because we're fiscally responsible in our current form, then we would have done that. We don't have the capacity, which is why we are looking to bring on some consultants, being fiscally responsible. We're also focused on the assessments because we realize that this is a long-term investment. And no one's going to approve the plan unless we can prove, as Councilmember, not Harity, as Councilmember O'Rourke always talks about, counting the cost. We have to show you all and demonstrate to you all that we have counted the cost, right? And that we're going to do that continually. And that's where those assessments come in at. It lays the framework, it substantiates the approach, and it affirms that we're on the right track. And throughout the process, if we're no longer on the right track due to externalities like change in market demand, shifts in priorities, change in the ecosystem based on what's happening at the federal level, then we can pivot quickly because of that comprehensive assessment. So thank you for calling that out and even bringing attention to the fact that we are focusing on assessments. Regarding the investments and the investment strategy there, I'll kick it over to Rob.
I just wanted, for overall context, the plan is a $2 billion plan. $1 billion is property, $800 million is the bond, and then there's another $200 million. We are still talking through the best sources of funding within that for particular items. And so you're right, we may look at these and say, you know what, those shouldn't come through the bond. They should come through the Housing Trust Fund. They should come through the general fund. But that is a discussion that we are having and that we want to continue to have.
And just to answer your last question, or the one question you had about the proportion of programs that speak to preservation specifically, if you don't mind me reading off all 15, I can give that to you.
Sure.
That's the adaptive modification, affordable housing preservation, that's a neighborhood-based rental preservation, that's funding, gap funding, the basic systems repair, which we know. We have curbside appeal, we have facade improvement, we have home service clearinghouse, so that's giving people the opportunity to link up with people, the masters of the trade that do the work. Neighborhood infrastructure program, that's the alleyways and driveways. Permanent housing and supportive services, tenant-based rental assistance. Rental improvement fund, restore, repair, renew. There is also row house protection, and there's also targeted housing preservation program, and then there's weatherization as well. And collectively, that funding amounts up to about $492 million, almost $493 million.
493. Thank you very much for this.
Thank you. Councilmember Nicholas O'Rourke, then Councilmember Dr. Nina Mine.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, administration. The Home Initiative is proposed to fund 38 different programs and projects. That is a lot. You called it comprehensive. I would agree. Several of these programs, like the basic systems repair, the adaptive modifications, Philly First Home, Turn the Key, are tried and true. They are effective programs that we know work well, and importantly, work well when funded by bonds as a public investment in our city's future. And we know that because of the incredible success, after some trial and error, I'm told, of the Neighborhood Preservation Initiative, something that took place before I got to this body. Many other proposed home programs are new, though. They're completely untested, or at least untested in a bond finance context. This plan is a massive step. As the president mentioned, it's not even hypothetical. It is the single largest bond measure in Philadelphia history. I want to echo my colleague, Member Landau. I actually am really inspired by the bold initiative that the mayor is taking and the step that they're taking here. It demonstrates that we can do hard things. We can do big things, and I think that's what an executive ought to be willing to do. And also, a bond is a very expensive investment, and it behooves us to ensure that it pays off and is worth the amount of debt service, 1.3 over 20 years, that we would be taking on. And remember that ultimately this administration would not have to deal with the weight and responsibility of paying off that debt because it'll outlive your time in office. I'm really concerned that, one, the plan is spread so thin among 38 different programs And two, that so much of this plan is oriented toward new and untested programs. So I have a couple questions. Just so I can be clear, this is not a part of the budget. We do not actually have to pass this with the budget. So why is there such a quick timeline on this? Wouldn't it make more sense for us to have a robust engagement process to help decide the best focus for this funding and then agree on a more informed and focused plan later in the fall or in the winter? It really feels like we're kind of rushing this.
We have a crisis. That's why. We have a crisis. That's the reason why. And it has persisted for far too long. And what I believe that we're collectively saying is not on our watch. And that's why we're doing it now. We have a crisis and we want to address it now. And while I may not be in this seat in 20 years, I'll still be a resident in 20 years. My daughter will be here in 20 years from now. Council President Johnson talked about his son 20 years from now. That's who we're thinking about. I don't want to let the crisis continue to roll. We're saying not on our watch. So that's why. But also, there's something that you mentioned. You said, there are some untested programs. That's the reason why the assessments are so important. The assessments we did that were conducted before we got here, and the assessments that we're proffering or proposing that will continue even in the midst of this plan to ensure that it's not just some a plan that is made up based on ego to say that we did something big, but it is tested. It is based on data, and I'll turn it over to Greg Heller to talk more about those tested programs that are new. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, good afternoon. Greg Heller, consultant with the city. I just do want to reiterate there are 35 existing programs and 20 new programs in the home plan. And again, the home plan is not just the bond-funded programs. It's the whole holistic approach with multiple funding sources. The need for new programs was identified through the data analysis, where we found that there were gaps in who and where were being served by the existing programs, and there was a need for other approaches to fill those gaps. There was pretty significant amount of research and talking with other cities, looking at other approaches, evaluating the data, and all of the new programs are based on successful approaches and or evidence-based. There's been, like I said, a significant amount of best practices research that's pretty well documented from cities around the country, trying to figure out what are approaches and how they need to be adapted to fit local conditions and need. So the new programs, I just want to emphasize, were not sort of pulled out of the air. They were based on in-depth data analysis, best practices research, and working closely with other cities to make sure that they are viable, based in data, and can be successful here.
Thank you for the explanation. I heard the bell. You brought another gentleman up to perhaps speak. I have one more question before we roll. Yes, ma'am.
If I may, Council President and Council Member O'Rourke, when I was in my previous role in 2016, we were doing rebuild, and a part of that, the Knight Foundation paid for us to go and look at other cities. And I remember being in Detroit, and I remember standing at the 8th Mile and hearing from the actual residents talk about that. In fact, Council Member Jamie Gaultier, we were on that same trip together. And we did those learning journeys together as part of your previous role before becoming an esteemed elected official. But I remember hearing from residents today at that point, talking about the impact that still persisted at that moment from decisions that were made years ago. And so we don't want to be paralyzed by inaction. I think it's important to even talk about how I don't have to go to Detroit to see how redlining has impacted Philadelphians. It happens here. It's happening here. But I want Ira to also talk about the programs. Ira to talk about the programs and how we're addressing even matters like redlining here in the city.
Good morning. I'm Ira Goldstein with the Reinvestment Fund, a consultant to the city on this. Guidehouse did an extraordinary amount of research on best practices for programs that touch the different kinds of problems that we identified here in the city. As you know, we were involved in creating the estimates of the number of housing units that were short, as well as identifying areas where we are overbuilt. And there are significant parts of the city where we have more units than we need. They're going vacant.
what home is meant to address is the production in the areas and for the populations that need that production. But we also identified that there were a fair number of places around the city and more than 20,000 households where the conditions of those homes were sufficiently bad in terms of either showing code violations or multiple code violations, low value and old age together, which are generally a sign of a property in need of repair. So what we were trying to do really with the home program was to sort of understand the ecology of the different needs of the city in terms of its housing, housing its population, and figuring out which programs get to that. In addition, as Tiffany had mentioned, it is important to understand that we didn't get here by accident. There are lots of things that brought us to the place where we have significant parts of the city that are starved of investment. They're starved of investment for a whole host of different reasons, including redlining, and including other things that sort of pile on top. And so the home initiative is also designed to include the kinds of things that address the ability of institutions to be able to do constructive business in the city and to rebuild the neighborhood. So we do have initiatives tied to appraisal bias, trying to understand whether or not people are getting fair values in the evaluation of their home. Separate and apart, but not unrelated, we're looking at assessment bias as well. So we do have ways, and as part of this larger home initiative, of trying to understand what's at the root cause of some of these issues that we're trying to address with home, and we will address them.
Thank you for your responses. One other before I go on. I could be wrong, so I want to say it on the front end. But it seems like there are parts of this plan funding programs that were previously funded by the general fund. Could you provide a written breakdown of any programs that have had any of their general fund dollars replaced now by home dollars between FY25 and FY26?
Yes, we can provide that in writing.
Thank you very, very, very much. And I'll come back on the next round. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilmember Dr. Nina Ahmad, then Councilmember Jeffrey J. Young.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you all for being here. This is obviously a very heavy lift, and so we are proceeding as judiciously as possible with as much information as we have. I had asked this question, and I think Rob DeBoe had responded to that, about has the city secured commitments from lenders to commit beyond debt financing and mortgage lending to make sure that their commitments that provide philanthropic support into the Housing Trust Fund. And they can make these contributions because, and this is counted as the CRA obligations, and they have these large foundations. So at that time, he had said he had started beginning to talk to banks. I wanted to know where we are on that, how firm these commitments are, because we really could, we could match the bond issues that we are floating with commitments from these private lenders who are required to meet their CRA requirements and who have money set aside in their foundations. So I just wanted to know how far have we come with that conversation and commitment?
Yeah, we don't have any commitments yet. We have ongoing conversations with banks, really about kind of number of ways that they could help with this.
Outside of mortgages and debt financing?
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Okay.
And those conversations will continue.
So for us to commit to doing this two-tranche bond floating, we would like to have that information in hand before we can make these commitments, because that would relieve a lot of the burden. So I don't know how you speed this up or what, but we need that in order for us to put our city into debt far beyond our tenure here. And these are future mayors who are going to have to deal with it. So I just wanted to know what is driving these conversations with these lenders? How urgent is it? Do they understand that we can't get this done without them?
Yes, they understand the urgency. and they are committed to helping. So we do think that we will get agreements with them, and we understand that we need to do that quickly.
Yes, we need numbers. We need dollar amounts, we need actual commitments, we can't build on such a shaky foundation where all the money is going to come out of our taxpayer hides. So we have to really bring all these other partners who make money off of us, who make money off our taxpayers. Their income stream is coming from us. So I just want to underscore that this is serious and they need to really show skin in the game in order for us to thrive, because when the city thrives, they thrive. And so just wanted to underscore the urgency, and we need this information before we can make these massive decisions.
I think it's also important to note that we have to also demonstrate to lenders and to the philanthropic community and others that we are asking to fund this, that the city is also committed. So we agree with you, and it's both and, right? We have to also demonstrate that we are ready to do what we need to do to also meet the crisis as an administration, as a city. So absolutely, we agree.
I think this is a shared commitment.
Yes.
And I think they have to understand that we can't go down this road of wanting. We need much more firmer conversations where we have some commitments, because it is a bold plan, and we would love to do a bold plan, but we need skin in the game from other people who are going to benefit from this bold plan. So I urge you to get back to us with much more firmer commitments with dollar amounts that you have been able to get. And you can tell them that your commitment is going to drive this conversation and this whole plan forward. So they can understand their role in committing will make us move faster. So I just wanted to underscore that. Thank you, Council President.
And I just to add there, I welcome what your comment and feedback is, but I just wanted to recognize that there are existing lender funding commitments through our accelerator fund. So there's a mechanism in place that we have, that there is an existing stream of funding that is coming in, and that's the kind of thing that we're looking to leverage in these conversations, knowing that not just in accelerator fund, but knowing that there have been tremendous amount of conversations around the lending community support of Turn the Key, things like that. We're definitely starting some new conversations, but we're absolutely leveraging some existing conversations as well.
I just want to make sure they understand their mortgage and debt financing should not be counted in that pool that they're giving, because they can mix that up and say, yeah, we're doing our part, we're doing all this, we're underwriting all this. Nope, separate. Yeah. Separate actual philanthropic dollars that is coming out of their foundations that they have set up to do exactly this. So I just want to be clear about that.
We recognize that, Councilman.
Okay, thank you, Council President.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Jeffrey J. Young, and then we'll prepare for our second round before we wrap up.
Thank you, Mr. President, and still good morning for a couple of minutes. With the proposed federal cuts to HUD, I look at the home plan and see that there is minimal, if any, allocation to PHA regarding, our most vulnerable housing citizens. And so if we are planning to borrow, or this project, this proposal is almost $2 billion, and HUD is, threatening to defund itself, essentially. The president is threatening to defund HUD. We can lose our Section 8 vouchers. They're providing caps, but they want to do 2-year caps on, public assistance, public housing assistance. Out of this amount of money, knowing that this crisis that we're going into, you admit it's a crisis, and PHA has been a partner throughout this crisis. Can you tell us what the rationale is behind not including them as a partner in order to help them leverage some funding from the city so they can go out and continue to do the things that they're doing? Because I do know, just watching what PHA has done in this city, if you give them $1, for some reason they turn that to 10. They have that ability to do that, and so I think that our money will go a long way if we can invest in PHA as well through this program. So can you tell us what the rationale and thinking is behind excluding them from direct funding for this program?
We fully support PHA, and so any notion around excluding them or saying that, you know, we're not working with them, that is not true. So
The dollars don't say that.
One
That's a
moment.
question.
So we are working with Kelvin Jeremiah, and we are not we stand with him, right? We're not standing against him. So now we can talk further about the allocation, but I want to be very clear, and I even mentioned that in my opening comments. I know that you weren't here. I can submit that to your office, but we support the work that Kelvin Jeremiah is doing. We can't do this without him. But in terms of our funding strategy, I'll kick that over first to Jesse.
Thank you.
So, I mean, you know, it's certainly to the Chief of Staff's point that we see partners in PHA, and they've definitely been part of the conversation. They are always part of the conversation when it comes to housing. But we also recognize that we're trying to respond to a a vast continuum of housing, right? And PHA is a portion of that, which is why we are looking to provide funding for things along the lines of acquisition. PHA is on a very ambitious acquisition effort to support their program. So, I mean, to specifically talk about which line item talks to them when it comes to that, it is the acquisition fund that gives us the opportunity to support them in their acquisition efforts as they chart toward 12,000 units, 20,000 units.
So are you saying that the acquisition funds from the home initiative will be given to PHA so they can acquire properties on their own?
I'm saying PHA is would be eligible for that. They would be eligible public developer for that particular
They will be eligible like any other entity is or developer is eligible, what you're saying. But so there's no direct line item for them specifically in this. They have to compete with it like everyone else.
Well, I mean, there's no specific line item outside of that, but I mean, as a department and as a city, we definitely invest and we support their applications when it comes to PHA tax credit projects. So there's partnerships outside of home itself when it comes to PHA, and we recognize the power and strength in that. But, you know, again, we definitely are supportive of what PHA is doing, but it would be, you know, not to our advantage to dedicate a whole pot of funding to just them, because they're a partner in this, but they're a portion of this, and we recognize again that we have a comprehensive plan, a larger continuum.
So the financing that we currently do around LIHTC, that doesn't change. The partnership with Kelvin Jeremiah, under his leadership, of course, but with the organization, that doesn't change. But this spurs the work that we're trying to do across the entire spectrum to meet the need, to meet the crisis.
I just think, you know, you mentioned partnerships outside of this. I think they need to be included inside of this program in order for us to leverage this large amount of money so we can get the most bang for our buck as we are stretching to try to touch, you know, 30,000 units. I think they have, you know, units in a pipeline that can help us get to that number at a quicker pace. So, thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Member Young. Just had a question as we go into the second round. I guess this would be for Jesse.
Okay.
Could you provide the chair a copy of the Land Bank's agreement with PHDC or PHDC agreement with the Land Bank?
So we can get the details that spell out how the two work with each other, right? The Land Bank itself obviously is one of the handful of the multiple city agencies that own land itself. I do believe there are only 2 employees specifically to the Land Bank, one of them being Angel Rodriguez, and if I'm not mistaken, one of their attorneys. But the Land Bank is staffed by PHDC. So, I mean, I think Dave Thomas can get you the materials that spell out how exactly that staffing, how PHDC staffs the Land Bank operations. But again, PHDC is the staffing entity for the Land Bank.
And also in the role of the board, because I know it's the overarching, you got the board, then you got the staff at PHDC, then you got the Land Bank under, that's the organizational structure, correct?
So yeah, Land Bank does have its own board, just like, you know, PHDC staffs the Redevelopment Authority, which also has its own board. But these boards they coincide with the inventories of land and the operations that live specifically with them. But PHDC is the city's nonprofit that staffs those particular entities.
Okay, all right, thank you. And then Jesse, while we're at it, just want to do a follow-up. I know going back to MPI, in year 1 we spent $89 million, and then in year 2 we spent $67 million, which is a total of $457 million over 24 months. And so for the home plan to be effective, right, how are we spending $400 million in the same time period? We ain't even talking about the whole $800 million. Let's just talk about spending the $400 million in a 2-year time period and taking consideration that you have to staff up, anticipation and being thoughtful about any delays that may come down the pipeline, and also launching new programs and new staff. So just give me an idea how we would at least spend, we're not even talking about the $800 million, but let's just focus on the $400 in a 2-year time period. And just give us a view of your vision to spend that money down.
I think that answer to that question probably deserves a Gantt chart that we can probably deliver to you in the form of something hard copy. I guess you could say something written, but I think that we said it a time or two before that we have mapped out when the drawdown is going to be. We have mapped out when we plan to spend on certain things and what time it takes to stand up the 20 programs that are new and being introduced. And I think that you brought up the fact about staffing, but also indicating that we need to look at the ability to respond to how we do that in ways that recognize how long it actually takes to put programs in place. So, as we talk further with you all and talk amongst ourselves and actually bring this additional staff on, we'll have a better understanding of how long it's going to take. But we have these preliminary understandings of how long it's going to take. First drawdown will be in 26, the second drawdown will be in 27, but understanding that, to your point, the original question, $400 million within a certain time frame, that's because we've quantified the need. We've taken that step to research where the demand is, and we want to match that dollar amount and the program and the delivery with that actual demand.
And I know you said this is something that should be given in writing, so please provide the chair in writing how you see the drawdown, spend that $400 million. So thank you for offering that as well. That would be helpful as well.
For Councilmember Young, we could also provide in writing the ways in which PHA is baked into this plan.
The mayor mentioned at the announcement that PHA was a part of the plan.
Absolutely, the shallow rent
And I think his question is in terms of our commitment financially and working in partnership with PHA.
We can definitely provide that, because I'm looking here. The shallow rent program, the acquisition fund, there are programs under production and throughout that benefit PHA. So we can provide that breakdown in writing.
Okay. Before I turn it over to my members, I want to talk more about the Home Service Clearinghouse and Concierge Program. How will it be implemented? The process for contract selection, and making sure we're protecting ourselves from any type of legal liability because it's already a pre-selected list.
Hi, Greg Heller, consultant for the city. So this is one of these programs that would be a new program, but that's based on best practices in other places that we've looked at and are trying to bring the best for Philadelphia and customize it to here. So the idea behind it is that this is something that we've seen in a number of programs, including Restore, Repair, Renew, where homeowners have a hard time finding qualified contractors, coordinating multiple trades, scheduling, payment, figuring out how to review invoices and write-ups that are in all different formats. So the idea here is for the city to contract with one or more third parties who would make this easy and smooth for homeowners, who would vet contractors, provide training and quality control, who would, you would just reach out to the clearinghouse instead of all the different contractors. So if you need a carpenter and a roofer and an electrician, the concierge service would help identify those contractors, would coordinate, would deal with scheduling, would provide clear work write-ups and invoices that are typed and in a consistent format, would provide ease of payment through their system instead of having to pay multiple contractors. So it would basically make this much smoother and easier for homeowners to navigate and to coordinate and ensure quality. In terms of specifically how that quality control is going to be carried out, there are good examples around the country. We'll work together to figure out what approach and what requirements we have on the third party in terms of their quality control, but generally it's looking for certain types of experience, certifications, shadowing the contractor on site, having them shadow an existing contractor in your network, providing ways to have feedback from homeowners to evaluate contractors in real time, so things like that. But we'll make sure that we put a strong quality control protocol in place for the third parties who are participating.
Thinking along the lines of quality control, and I know Member Young introduced legislation, and I remember even a former member, Sanchez, had legislation. I don't know if it came into law, either one of them yet, but because we're embarking on such a significant initiative around development and construction, an issue that's always happening, at least in the second councilmatic district, with all the gentrification that we've seen taking place in development, the building of new homes having a negative impact on long-term residents' home. The shifting of foundations, stories of the houses were cool and secure. Then all of a sudden, developer A comes along and starts the building. The home on the lot has an impact on the two houses on each side. Are we taking in consideration any precautions in terms of, one, liability, right, as a city, but also, most importantly, probably even more than this liability for the city, but protecting our homeowner who says, my house is pretty secure, and then once they start building these houses, then I start having cracks or foundations starting to shift. Have we taken that in consideration?
We have, by way of a row house protection program, that is part of the programming that we are proposing, understanding that folks might have those types of effects, but might not necessarily have the means to litigate it or go to court about it. So making sure that there is funding available for those instances is important to us.
And that's in the home.
That's in home. And also, I want to just kind of add on to the description of the home concierge. So I do want to flag the fact that we have been in conversation with PEA when it comes to their ability to administer programs along the lines of what we're trying to deliver in home concierge.
Philadelphia Energy Authority?
Yeah, Energy Authority.
So are you publicly saying y'all partnering with Built to Last?
We are saying that we are engaged in conversation with Built to Last
Okay.
about being able to
rocking and rolling, yeah. You up there, one city, rocking and rolling. So that's what's up. That's what I'm talking about. I love it when we all are working together. And again, I know for a fact every last member of City Council I've talked to individually are definitely on board with the spirit, because we all know we need to address housing. We all know we have to address those who have aging infrastructure in terms of their homes and so forth in the city of Philadelphia. And so the chair recognizes Member Phillips for a point of information.
I just, a quick question. Does that mean that it's merging Built to Last into, or is it still going to be separate? Because sometimes people are confused.
I think the essence of the program in Built to Last, there are a lot of overlaps between what we're looking to do in home concierge. So we're in active conversation about figuring out how something like that can coexist.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Can I get y'all to commit to that $10 million now while I have you here? I had a couple other questions in regards to, walk up on me like that. A couple questions. The commitment from the unions and other partners, is there a dollar amount at this particular moment that has been secured that you are able to talk about, or everything is a work in progress in terms of conversations?
We're making really great progress.
Okay.
But negotiations, the proposal isn't finalized.
Okay. All right.
Council President.
Council will be at ease for 10 minutes.
I got North.
211 is what we call it.
Just my last two questions, and I'll turn it over to the Chair of Housing. This is for where's Mr. Rob DeBoe? Okay, he hasn't come back yet. Oh, hey, Rob, how you doing? I've learned as a young council member coming in here, Tiffany, under the tutelage of the great Rob DeBoe, you know how to make sure I'm making fiscally sound decisions. And
John told me if I stood in the back, I wouldn't get called up anymore, and one question.
So I just want to get an idea, Rob, out of the first 400 million that we want to see spent, how much will we see, how much out of the first 400 million has to be spent before we do the second borrowing?
Yeah, so we, you know.
And I learned that from you. We won't be playing debt service on money that's just sitting there. That's what I learned.
Yes, thank you. You know, as Jesse said, the plan is to spend all that 400 within 2 years. But what we will do is monitor the spend and see when we're at a point where several months out, we'll need more money, and then we'd borrow at that point. Our projection is that will happen in about a little over 2 years. But we will, we'll look at how the spend goes to determine when we do our second borrowing.
Okay, all right. With that being said, I'm going to turn over to the Chair of Housing, Councilman Jamie Gauthier.
Thank you, Council President. For this round, I want to focus on what the Council President brought up earlier about the role that Council will have in the implementation of HOME. But first, I just want to put a couple of quick questions on the record that I hope you can follow up on in writing. There were a couple numbers in your updated funding spreadsheet that I didn't quite understand. One was Fresh Start PHL having an FY25 budget of $19 million, but only an FY26 budget of $1 million. Getting clarity on that would be great if you could follow up. And also, why does the permanent housing line only have federal money in it and no bond money? Because that seems like an important way to produce new units for people coming out of homelessness. And so if you could just clarify those items in writing, it'd be great, because I assume that you need longer explanations for those. What I would like for you to tell us today is what specific organizational and collaborative structure you all are proposing in the HOME plan in terms of how spending and strategic decisions get made between council and the administration over the length of the two bonds. The only specifics that we've heard you give so far have been around working with district council members on which public vacant land to dispose of. Otherwise, it's just been more general references to continue to collaborate. But when our branches of government have collaborated successfully, all of that structure has been reviewed and decided upon and included in enabling legislation. And since we haven't, we're waiting on the draft bills for the spending, we don't really know what role you envision for council, at least not in a detailed way. Tiffany, earlier you brought up rebuild held. That enabling legislation included mandatory hearings and reporting and that the investment sites be submitted to council on an annual basis, and a project review team that council was a part of. And Council President Johnson earlier brought up MPI 2.0 because essentially home would become or replace MPI if it was approved. And MPI includes similar levels of budget review as well as organizational infrastructure in both branches of government that work together outside of the council chambers. And so I wanted to hear from you on which of these mechanisms will be included in your draft legislation for home, or are you proposing some different type of structure?
Yeah, so one, the bond legislation will be introduced next week. It will be presented next week. I believe May 15th is the date. Also want to be very clear and get on the record that home does not replace NPI, nor does it become NPI. So that's important to state as well.
I assume we're not going forward with another large bond issuance for MPI if we do that. That's what I mean by that.
Yeah, so regarding the organizational structure and the collaboration between council, one of the things that we said last time was that it starts with the district council members. Of course, it doesn't end there, but going through the amount of assets that we have now that we believe will make up that 30,000 units it's important, and we want to make sure, again, just like every other approach, that the data is accurate and that we're aligned. And then from there, one aspect, which is what I talked about on the record when we were here a few weeks ago, was when we think specifically about land disposition and the 1,000 units that we are proposing for the first pilot, we want to make sure that we're aligned with council on the framework, that it's based on a set of factors around equity and also need, right? So that's important as well. I'll kick it over to Angela to talk more about the organizational structure and the collaboration with council, and then of course Jesse to end it.
Thank you. Good morning, and is it still morning? Good afternoon. Angela Brooks, Chief Housing and Urban Investment Officer for the city. And, I think part of the meetings that we've been having with council members is to kind of determine that. So I do think that as we start thinking about moving forward, and you'll probably see reflected next week, we do plan on working with council and also engaging community as we move forward. So some of the examples of ideas you mentioned will be incorporated in that. We're looking forward to having meetings. I believe we've met with you, we've met with some other council members and incorporating some of your ideas. I think one of the important things to mention is that engagement has been a very focal point of this administration, and it will continue both with council and with community. And so as we continue to move forward, we'll continue to do that. I'll turn it over to Jesse because he's been doing a lot of work on that, particularly around the land disposition.
Yeah, and I mean, it won't be too much more because Angela covered the correspondence kind of channel of communication when it comes to council. But, we certainly value the relationship that we have with council when it comes to land disposition, and understanding that we utilize your initiatives to really understand what gets built and where it gets built, right? So, we've already started to have these conversations, started to meet with council members, and we, as we're reaching out, we look forward to having or continuing those meetings. But when it comes to land disposition, again, that is going to be a conversation about what pre-authorization looks like in terms of properties and also qualified developers. The property list, I'm glad we have had this kind of a round of conversations with certain council districts so far, because we're able to make, certain clarifications. It's 1,000 properties across the city, not just 1,000 properties per, council district. So being able to make those sorts of clarifications have been important. But also, again, community engagement is important to us, right? And we want to work with you hand in hand to figure out what that looks like and how impactful that can be going forward. Too many times do we have to look at projects in terms of, too many times do we see projects get not necessarily discontinued or just not supported because there was no correspondence with the community on the front end. So, that's what we're looking at council to be really kind of the biggest partner when it comes to that.
Thank you. I think I'm talking, although we await more detail about what you all want on this land disposition side, I think I'm talking about going beyond that. I'm talking about overall strategy, spending, when we're coming together to review those things, who are the decision makers on the council side, on the admin side. We've had a lot of conversation between the council and the admin today about, for instance, how that money gets spent. Beyond just an initial coming together around that, if we choose to go forward with this bond issuance, it needs to be baked into the legislation. All of those aspects of how decisions get made along the way, and we need to be on the same page about that structure. That's what I'm asking for.
Yeah, we can provide more further detail, but it's interesting that you mentioned rebuild. One thing this will not be is a decades-long process where we see continued deferred maintenance, continued, assets in disrepair, and they remain in disrepair due to, a process that was meant to, spur engagement, but all it did was prolong decision-making. So, but you're asking for specifics, and that is something that we absolutely can provide in writing when we follow up with the other questions.
Thank you. I would recommend that that is a piece of the, incorporated into the legislation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The chair recognizes Councilman Jim Harity, then Councilman Rulandell, and Councilman O'Rourke.
Thank you, Council President. When the administration refers to updating homes for the home initiative, what specifically does that include? Is it limited to cosmetic improvements like painting and tile, or does it extend to major systems like electrical, plumbing, structural work? And what threshold determines the scope of that update?
So I'd like to call up Dave Thomas to talk about what those programs entail. But I will be clear about the fact that these different programs are supposed to speak to different aspects, just as you described. Basic systems repair, really kind of the ability to make emergency repairs to some very important systems. Restore, repair, renew, being able to add on to the cosmetic aspect and taking steps toward that. Weatherization as well, being able to really kind of protect your home against the elements. But I'll talk to Dave.
And just as a follow-up to that too, can they qualify for multiple? So could they qualify for the systems repair if they needed a heater, and then also qualify for cosmetic work if that's needed?
So before I turn it over to Dave, the answer to your question is yes, and we are taking steps to make sure that we determine that up front with our one front door to be able to access that website, take a look, or literally submit your information, really kind of document what your needs are, and then that is a tool that will really kind of parse it out and tell you what you're qualified for.
Yeah, because that would absolutely speed stuff up, you know what I mean? People could get it all done one time, and yep.
Understanding intake is important.
No, but I think, unless of course Jesse didn't answer anything, I think Jesse did a better job than I probably would have done articulating the programs. Obviously, BSRP focuses on major systems and repairs. As he pointed out, a rental improvement fund is designed to help keep small landlords in the game of renting affordable units, allowing them to do cosmetic work as well as major systems. We also have RRR, Restore, Repair, Renew, that allows you to do a multitude of things as well. Whether it be major systems, you can combine it with BSRP when we often have situations where our grant does not go far enough to save that home. And we also have other resources like the adaptive modification. So we often combine all of those programs to try to address the broad need that the consumer has.
So a homeowner so they can apply for these things, that's great, but they can actually still get turned down if their house is deemed too much needs to be done? Is that what you just said?
There are some situations where the need is far greater than our resources can support, but that's very, very few. But it does happen, and we often try to figure out alternatives to figure out ways in which we can support saving that property. So working on it now, I have a property right now that we're working on a multitude of opportunities that we believe are available to save that property.
And what would happen in a situation like that? Say we have a senior and it's just too late for a house, and the way it sounds to me that it would be probably condemnable. Are we condemning this house and then They have no place to live? Well, how do we deal with
Yeah,
that?
well, we certainly don't condemn. We're not the condemning authority.
Okay.
We have had in past years, in my tenure, in my experience, we've had situations where we've been unable to save that house. We've worked with PHA and many opportunities for seniors to be relocated into senior multifamily developments. So we continue those relationships. We certainly don't want to see anyone on the street.
So we do help?
Yes.
Good. All right, I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The chair recognizes Councilmember Ruth Landau, then Councilmember Nicholas O'Rourke, Councilmember Jeffrey J. Young.
Thank you. Just two quick questions. One was, I was really excited to see an interest in supporting renters in accessing new homes or apartments, something you know is an issue I'm working on. The upfront costs of finding a new apartment, I hear from constituents all the time, not only is it very difficult, but the upfront cost to move in is sometimes a huge barrier that they can't overcome. So can you provide more detail on the record about the Fresh Start program, which I'm very excited about? Who will qualify? How many renters do you think it will support? How much in the dollar amount could each renter get? And about how you arrived at the $4 million figure for funding for this initiative. Just in general, want to see how many families we can help here. I'm putting my second question on while we're doing it. I wanted to know also how you came up with the number of the 300 market rate units that you proposed in the plan. It's just, for me, that was a random number. We talked about it more and was hoping I can get some more insight into the 300 market rate units. But Fresh Start first.
So I'd like to defer your first question to Mark Dodds, who leads our Division of Housing and Community Development, who works very closely with the program.
Excellent.
Such as that.
Thank you. Hey, Mark.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for the question. So Fresh Start, and it was also mentioned, the question also was risen earlier. That program is currently funded with reallocated rental assistance dollars. That's why you're seeing such a high amount in FY25 versus FY26. Quite frankly, that program just launched. PHDC is administering it in consultation with DHCD and other folks. And we want to get a handle on how that program's performing before we commit such an equally high amount in subsequent years. In order to participate, you have to be at or below 80% AMI. We are prioritizing, I believe, applicants that come in at 50% or below AMI, and it includes the first 3 months rent as well as move-in assistance. Move-in assistance is $1,000, and we expect the average payment amount to be around $5,000. So in terms of household served, the math would be 19 million divided by 5,000.
Slow down. You said household served, and what did you say?
The math would be 19 million divided by 5,000. I was trying to do it.
19. Oh, you're doing it in your head. Thank you. Okay.
Council member, we have Ira Goldstein here to speak to the other question that you have.
Okay.
Essentially,
Thank you so
that data, that number is data-based, and Ira can talk to the rationale behind that.
Good afternoon. So the idea is when we estimated the number of units that were needed to be produced or preserved in the city of Philadelphia, part of the way that we made estimations about what incomes levels they would touch is where those shortages are in the city and what the census-tracted income information looks like. And so we're not actually suggesting that the city would subsidize or put money into, other than through the normal new or rehabilitation tax abatement. We're not suggesting that they would create those 300 units, but they would be 300 units that would be in areas that in general have an income that's a little bit higher.
Which units are these? How do they exist? I don't understand then what the units are then if they're not created. Are you saying we're going to count 300 units towards the 30,000 that just receive a small amount of city funding?
If these units ended up being produced in higher income areas, but they would still be for people who could have, not at that affordability level, but they would be in parts of the city that might be a little bit higher income.
Who do you expect are producing these units?
Producing the units or purchasing or coming to rent in?
I am fully confused now. You said these are not 300 units that are being built or rehabbed. They are units that are randomly appear in a neighborhood? I'm confused.
No, that's not what we're saying. What we're saying, the market every year produces thousands of units without any city touch other than, for example, as I said, the property tax abatement. So these, and those housing units happen all over the city of Philadelphia, right? When we estimated the 17,000 units that were short, and we estimated the income levels that they needed to touch, some of those units are in areas that are slightly higher income, but we do not expect that those units would be receiving subsidy under home at a level that would be prices or rents for higher income people. That's what I'm saying. That's still not clear?
And just to add on to that, so we did our best based on past performance and forecasting to figure out what household income levels all of these programs would serve and how many. We talked about that at the last hearing. There are a small number of households at 120% of AMI that we anticipate will be served by these programs, and we do have a breakout of those. So for example, access to bonding for local contractors, contractor training, demolition for redevelopment, home service clearinghouse and concierge, land bank operational assessment, long-term ground leases, which one is this? Positive housing marketing engagement. So there's a small amount of funding that gets allocated to those 120% AMI households that's attributable to that 300 units.
We can provide that spreadsheet with a breakdown and explanation.
That would be very, very helpful. Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Right, but again, that's the result of allocating all of the programs across all of home to what households at what income levels are they forecasted to serve based on past performance and then forecast for the new programs.
Thank you. The chair recognizes Councilmember Nicholas Nick O'Rourke, Councilman Jeffrey J. Young. Chair recognizes.
I'm so sorry, I just want to clarify.
Thurman.
I want to clarify that we will provide that information. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Chair recognizes Councilmember Nicholas Nick O'Rourke and Councilman Jeffrey J. Young, and Councilman Gaultier will wrap us up for the day.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a quick reflection on the first question that I lifted up. Just want to give a little commentary as I reflected on it during the break. There is something to be said about analysis of best practices, and you said it. And after that analysis, trying them out to prove the concept. It takes on a new dimension of risk when you do it while taking on more than $1 billion of debt that are then thinly spread over dozens of programs. It is a crisis. It is. And also, if the response to the crisis isn't just comprehensive, but also thorough in the way of a robust engagement process, it looks like you're doing a lot, like you're panicking and then rushing, and panicking and rushing creates a larger crisis. And that's what I wanted to speak to in general. But I meet the moment, I appreciate that we're meeting the moment, recognizing it as a crisis. I just wanted to state that for the record. This is my actual question. You responded actually in writing to my last question about using home funding to fund L&I inspectors. You said that, and I quote, bond proceeds cannot fund staff positions. But I'm seeing in the home plan that there is $3 million proposed to fund, quote, additional staff and capacity to remove blighted and vacant units owned or in possession of the city, end quote. Can you explain how the funds can pay for that, but not more staff capacity for L&I to perform proactive inspections?
So I want to be clear about the last update that we've provided to the body. It does not have that in the language. We have removed any references to utilizing this bond fund for staffing. There will not be a dedication of funds for staffing. Per the latest thing that we have submitted to the body, that is not included in there.
Can I get a point of information though?
Yes, sir.
And on the same lines of questioning, if we are ramping up 30,000 units of housing, as well as the preservation of infrastructure, which is rapid development, and we never want to see what we saw happen at 23rd Market. So what is the role in expanding L&I to make sure that these developers that comes from this clearinghouse list are, they say they qualify, and I know we would do our vetting to show that they're qualified, but at the rush, just to be quite frank, because there is a target. Y'all have a time frame that y'all have to accomplish this, so we cannot even act like that's not the case, which means you have to have an aggressive plan. You're going to hit the ground running. You're going to spend down, but the development is going to be so fast. Who's the check and balance from the inspection standpoint in terms of the role of L&I? So his question is, can the bond funding be used? And I think you're answering that. But also, my additional question is, he's advocating for additional staff in L&I. One, to go after slumlords, but also, I would think if we're building so much, we would have the L&I staff also on the ground. And when they came in front of us, they said, well, we want to address the vacancies that we have. And then once we address the vacancies, we'll come back. But we're building 30,000 units in an aggressive time frame in 2 years. So I would think our inspection and oversight we're going to need even more moving forward.
So we did, as part of HOME, when the mayor signed the executive order, we looked at over 26 different departments, within the city of Philadelphia, and we asked them, what do they need to do to be successful? What would success look like? And that's everything from looking at their right complement of staff, the funding to not just even beyond staff in order to be successful. So whether we're working with Basil Miranda, Commissioner Miranda, or Commissioner Greenwald, we know that we have quite a few vacancies in their department. So that is the first step. So what we're saying, what we've said on the record before, during the 5-year plan hearing, during their hearing, and even now, first, let's fix the problem that we have at hand, which is filling the current vacancies. And if we find that we need additional positions in order to be successful, whether it's with HOME and beyond HOME, with the initiative that you have brought up on the record, we will make sure that we have the right complement of staff, of course, and that goes back to even something that the question that Councilmember Gaultier has. That's where that collaboration comes in, right? So it's not that it's falling on deaf ears. We're saying we have vacancies now that we need to fill in order to meet the moment. Let's fill those now. It's no different than what we're doing at the land bank. We can throw positions at them, but they may find that they're hard to fill. Or that they don't need those positions. There are other positions that they need in order to be successful with HOME and beyond. So we're not saying no. We're not saying no. We're saying let's meet the problem that we have now and address that, filling the vacancies that we currently have.
That's fair. I mentioned that to another department yesterday. I'm going to go back to Member O'Rourke.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for that update in terms of having recently removed some of that language out. From the copy that we had, it didn't have that in that, so thank you for that update. I will say that I also believe that we heard that you're planning to hire 30 or more new staff to administer the plan. Wanted to know where the funding is coming from for those positions. Will they be union or exempt positions? I also know that MPI had a line item for administrative costs. Why is that not possible to do for the HOME initiative? If you could speak to those two. And I have one more question I just want to get on the record because I know my time is getting slim. In your written response, you underscore that the administration is committed to using the HOME initiative to support L&I's effort to develop a proactive inspection program. Can you explain what you plan for that to actually look like? Are you considering using HOME funds for software like we heard Washington, D.C. uses during our rental repair hearing that will triage the rental units in the worst conditions for proactive inspections? And yeah, I'll stop there.
So L&I is not here, so we can provide a more robust response in writing. but it is beyond what we have seen, right? We are looking at not just drones for cybersecurity and utilizing drones and that type of software for what we're doing in L&I currently or with our public safety units, but how do we use drones and technology like that to speed up our processes? And so we know we're testing out some of that equipment now in partnership with, of course, Commissioner Miranda and Commissioner Greenwald, but we can provide more of a robust response. They're just not here, so.
And just to add to that, existing infrastructure and programs like Eclipse, knowing that we have that tool, knowing that's something that spreads different departments, being able to utilize that in a more effective way to meet the demand. And just to answer your first question about the funding for the staffing, that's coming directly out of the planning and development's budget.
Okay. I just want to emphasize that it's hard to understand how our commitment to preserving housing works if we are not aggressively checking to make sure that our rental housing isn't falling apart around us. So I just want to underscore it, because this is, I think, the last round, so I want to get another chance at this bat, to just say that I really, really, really think it should be reflective even more in the plan to make sure that we are addressing rental inspections, rental housing, and making sure that that's being addressed. Thank you for your responses, your answers. Thank you for this time. I mean, I guess if you could say, in what other ways is the administration taking seriously to that end the dire need for our proactive inspection systems? If you could speak to that, I thank Mr. President for your indulgence.
Well, again, it's about making sure that L&I lives up to its commitment to our executive order in doing such, and being able to improve on the ability to inspect at a faster pace and a more, adding to the efficiency that they already have. But again, to that point that the Chief of Staff made, the administration is committed to working with L&I to meet those demands.
And I know we talked about the 32 positions. We provided that response in writing after the last hearing, but I also wanted to note for the record that on top of those 32 positions that we know that we will need in order to be successful in implementing this plan, we have 29 vacancies currently in the Planning and Development Department, right? So with the assessment that we're doing with the land bank, filling those 29 vacancies through the robust work that we're doing under Candy Jones's leadership in Office of Human Resources, along with those 32 positions, that's how we're going to be successful in implementing this.
I have a question, though, and I asked the same questions of the sheriff's office yesterday, who was coming before us, asking for $20 million, right? But if you have these vacancies, right, so what are you going to do with the money, and you already have vacancies that need to be filled? So the money just isn't sitting there. So that's the same question I just asked
the money is not sitting there, right? So when we're working with, I mentioned Candy Jones along with the HR team and planning and development. So we have a pipeline of very, very qualified candidates. Angel Rodriguez even talked about that. So these are not just stagnant funds that are sitting there. We have more people that are applying for roles now because of what's happening in the climate overall. We have highly qualified candidates now more than ever. So we won't have any problem filling those 29 vacancies or those 32 positions. And if I thought otherwise, I wouldn't say that on the record.
Just want to say on the record that property maintenance inspections only have one vacancy, just for the record. That's it.
Could you say it again?
Property maintenance inspections only have one vacancy. Property maintenance inspections only have one vacancy.
Under L&I?
I believe so, yes. Thank you for your time again. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Could we get a response on that one?
If that's what you're showing, then that's what you're showing. Again, L&I is not here. I don't have that budget detail in front of me, so I'm happy to respond in writing. What I can say, though, is before we got here, before we came up with the plan, before the deal was sealed, right, and we were ready to present it to council, we met with every leader and every deputy commissioner. We talked about the problem that we were trying to solve for, and then we gave them more than 30 days, but by way of the executive order, a final 30 days to respond to that. So they knew the goal. They were very clear on the goal. It wasn't just something that we pushed through and we said, make it happen. We said, we need your affirmation that we have what we need in addition to this bond deal in order to be successful. So it is there. It's also public on our Philly Stat 360 site as well.
So initially, what you're saying is the departments that were charged under the executive order pretty much gave you what their needs were
That's right.
to embark upon the home.
Yes.
And so with L&I having only one property maintenance inspector, they're okay with just that one, because had they needed more to embark upon the home initiative to address 30,000 unit of housing and home preservation, if they needed more than one inspector, they would have submitted that they need more than one.
What I can say is that the complement of staff that is represented in our FY26 budget detail reflects the successful implementation of home. I can't speak specifically to the one position because I don't have that budget detail in front of me, and my commissioner is not here. So I'm happy to respond to that in writing. But I can tell you, we don't present half-baked plans. That I can say emphatically.
We know that. We're just asking the questions.
Absolutely.
We're sure the administration wouldn't provide
I
half-baked
respect
plans.
that. I really do.
But I think his question is, right,
It's valid. It's more than valid.
is if it's one property maintenance inspector for an initiative we're about to embark on to inspect or to preserve or to build 30,000 units and preserve housing infrastructure within that, and they saying, not you, because you'll find out when you reach back out to Bridget or Basil that they only need one individual to help get this done. Okay, or maybe some of the positions that are vacant could be additional inspectors as part of that process. We don't know, but we'll look forward to getting it.
99% of the time, I can speak on behalf of the administration, which includes every department under the administration. In this instance, I can't, but I will provide a written response.
All right. Thank you very much. Anything else, Member O'Rourke? Thank you, Councilmember Young, and then we're wrapping up with Councilmember Jamie Gaultier.
Thank you, Mr. President. In any of the preservation initiatives, I've noticed that in my district in particular that we have a lot of older structures where L&I comes out and it deems the property, unsafe, and those homeowners are oftentimes don't know what to do, unable to afford the next steps. Is there any funding in this plan to provide homeowners with funding to allow them to access engineering reports in order to make their property safe, so they know what to do and how to make their property safe?
So I don't know that we've earmarked funds specifically for those types of reports, but we have earmarked opportunities to make sure that residents have the ability to contact who they need to talk to when it comes to seeking funds for repairs. We're under the impression that there needs to be much more targeted outreach, and that's the focus that we're having, that we've put into our plan, just making sure that our neighborhood advisory committees are actually empowered in a way to speak to those types of things, what to do, be much more advisory on what steps they can take. But it really is our ability to respond through our own programs, not so much as the reporting that would substantiate the ability for folks to go elsewhere to seek these types of reliefs. But we are looking to be the answer to the problem as opposed to informing a way to answer.
So along that note, if I'm a property owner and I just get hit with, L&I says, oh, my property is compromised, just say to some unsafe construction next door. Right now I have to go jump these loops to try to find a property owner, but at the same time, my property is at jeopardy, so I can't waste time finding that owner. What in this plan can I do as a property owner to get the assistance that I need?
So I'll defer to Mark Dodds, who can speak to this specific you need.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. So it was mentioned earlier, the row house protection project, a lot of that funding goes towards legal fees, but it also goes to supporting engineering costs or additional work along those lines.
Thank you. And one more question. I looked at the programs that are supported by home, and this is just my own calculation, almost about 20% of them is some kind of loan, acquisition, fund, something like that, right? And a few years ago, this body passed an ordinance that created the Philadelphia Public Financial Authority. and looking at legislation, there's a lot of things that that's within home that entity can do. The public financing entity that can develop and implement programs to fund programs improving affordable housing, commercial corridors, et cetera, right? And in the legislation, it says, the authority can make, purchase, sell, insure, guarantee, hold, otherwise deal with any loans, equity, other investments, accept contributions to capital, borrow money, issue notes, issue tax-exempt bonds, lend money, extend credit, acquire, develop, implement projects. These are all these things that are within home that essentially the finance authority has the authority to do. And so have you all thought about, using this authority to help implement the things that are within your home ideas?
So, a lot of what we're doing is in, soliciting investment, right? I'll let Rob talk to it a little bit more because it's really, a good amount of the loan products you're talking about, that is commitments that we're seeking from other lenders and other institutions. We're not actually providing that commitment, but I'll let Rob talk to it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I would have said.
But with this authority, you can issue tax-exempt bonds, and I know that this program is not, you're looking to do taxable bonds, but this tax-exempt bonds is something that could be issued through this authority. And on that same note, there are some items in here that could be used for tax-exempt bonds. Have you thought about having two different types of bonds to save the taxpayer some money? We're issuing tax-exempt bonds for those programs that qualify for tax-exempt bonds, and then having the taxable bonds for the others?
I'll answer your first question first, second question second. So we have existing authorities that are able to issue the debt. We don't need to basically create a new authority to do that. So our proposal is to use one of the existing authorities to issue the debt. In terms of taxable versus tax exempt, the reason that we're proposing to do this taxable is, one, to have the maximum flexibility in case we want to move money between programs that are authorized in the bonds, and in consultation with council, think, it'd be better to move some of this funding, at least in the short term, to a different program. We want to be able to do that, and the way we get the most flexibility is by doing that with taxable bonds.
But have you all done an analysis on how much taxpayer money could be saved if you were to go with a tax-exempt bond rather than a taxable bond for the things that are able to go under the tax-exempt bond?
Yeah, a lot of that depends on market conditions at the time we go to market, but it also would be overstating that difference if we looked at the entire issue, because a lot of what we're doing in the deal is not eligible for tax-exempt financing.
That's my point. So a lot of it is not eligible. So why increase the cost of taxpayers and not go with a tax-exempt bond for the things that are eligible?
Yep, and again, the reason that we're doing that is to ensure we have the flexibility if we need to move funding between programs, so that we can not run into problems with the tax exemption if we try to move something into the wrong pot.
I hear that answer, and it's an answer. I think that we are creative enough to figure out what exact amount that we need for the taxable bonds, where we won't have to try to move things back and forth. That's my time, Mr. President. I know the bell rang, so I'll yield. I'm okay. Thank you, Mr. President. Well, all right, thank you. You give me more time. So, in that same context with the taxable bonds, right? If I'm asking if you can break down for us, for council, to let us know what programs fall under what programs can be utilized with a tax-exempt bond, and which programs can be only utilized with a taxable bond, right? So we can give that analysis, we can do our due diligence to see if it's worth it or not to us to put forward this bond, this borrowing of this $2 billion program. Like you're putting a mortgage on our future here. So we want to make sure that it's at least, we're doing our due diligence as a body to make sure that we're saving the taxpayers as much money as possible with the program.
Yeah, no, we're happy to show you that, and within the caveat that that would kind of tie our hands with some of the stuff we need to do. But we're happy to give you that analysis.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. I'm good. Yeah, I'm good.
Thank you, Councilman Jamie Gaultier.
Thank you, Council President. Can you please clarify if the projected FY26 increase in the housing counseling budget is intended to replace the expiring CDBG CV funding, which means essentially keeping it level, or if it represents a genuine increase in the overall housing counseling budget from FY25? And I'm asking this because I think housing counseling is going to be critical to this plan. And then regarding the land bank operational assessment, you said that it's starting on an accelerated timeline, but it isn't listed in the FY26 budget. Is this a mistake, and is this going to be updated? And if I could get relatively quick answers to those questions, I have a couple of quick questions on the wait list for home repair programs.
It's not a mistake. The land bank operational assessment is occurring now. So we're happy to provide additional information. You asked us to go quick. And then for housing counseling, I'll go over to Dave.
Okay.
So this question came up in the previous round, and I just want to clarify. Mark Dodds, Division of Housing and Community Development. Housing counseling, the additional money in the home bond is meant to replace the expiring CDBG CV money.
Okay.
So it essentially is keeping it level. That said, it came up before. We certainly understand the importance of housing counseling. We're thinking about ways in which we might be able to support it differently. So, for instance, some activities around eviction diversion, that was previously funded by CDBG CV as well. In this budget, it's included in the housing counseling line item, but it's perfectly possible for us to take some of that, include it in program delivery, which would free up some funds for housing counseling. So we'd be happy to discuss that more and think about ways in which we could,
Thank you so much. And then lastly, on home repairs, the data you provided shows that the adaptive mod wait list is actually bigger than I thought it was, and that's before the proposal to increase eligibility to 80% AMI. Adaptive mod is very important to me because these are our seniors that we're serving through this program, are people with disabilities, people who are much more likely to be on fixed incomes and vulnerable to displacement. For that reason, I think clearing this backlog should be a high priority for us. My estimate is that it will cost $15 million to help every one of these over 1,700 people on the AMP wait list. So first, is that accurate by your calculations? And then, what is your estimate on how much it would cost to clear out the 2,800 people currently on the wait list for Built to Last?
All right, now I could do your AMP. I don't know if I could do your Built to Last, but so for adaptive modification, I believe your number is very close to being accurate, based on the information that you've been provided. The pace of getting to those folks is really tied to what we do to try to make sure that we're providing the right services, and that is an occupational therapist. So it's hard to find a large group of occupational therapists that can, be on call, so to speak. So I've actually gone to a different approach where I have independent occupational therapists, because I was using large companies at one time. They did not prioritize our people. So we're actively addressing those things a lot more aggressively than we did in the past. But it is still a challenge because we still have to sit down with the homeowner, understand what their conditions are, understand not only today, but tomorrow. So when we're providing a solution, that solution is not only going to satisfy your need today, but recognizing and projecting how your situation is going to progress, so to speak. It's not the easiest program to administer, and today we're actually running across a few other problems related to tariffs and other things because some of that equipment is not coming through as readily as it used to.
I see. Thank you for that. I think my point is the issue with finding the therapists withstanding. I think we should really look at clearing out these wait lists on programs that have shown to be not only popular, but great investments in terms of keeping people in the homes that they are already in, and would love for us to think about that further. Thank you so much. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you. And just to follow up on that line of questioning, which I'm pretty sure we have a plan for it, but when, in the event that this proposal moves forward, and we have the additional funding to support those organizations, I mean, those initiatives that already have wait lists and so forth. Just give me an idea how we're going to integrate the new funding and wrapping up the backlog, and obviously they will continually be the priority, probably go to the top of the list, right? Just give me an idea of their smooth transition of integration, which that sounds easier probably than it's said, but for me, it's like we got more money now. Let's just, especially you with them requests, you know, the $1 million a week request for a basic system home repair. So give us an idea how you're going to integrate all of them with the new funding to keep the ball moving forward.
All right, that's an interesting question, but you know, I'm not, this is not new to me. So right now, as we're speaking today, we're aggressively addressing that backlog. So we're looking at that backlog because, as I told you before, a lot of people fall out due to the fact that they don't return calls and things of that nature, and it actually impedes our ability to get to the people who have a true need. So we're actually addressing, I'm actually increasing the front line to address that need so that we can reduce that backlog. Ideally, we want to get to people within 6 months. That is my ideal time frame because, you know, some things do take time. Right now, we're somewhere around 6 to 12 months. And the reason why we don't really want to go beyond that 12-month period, because then we're going into another cycle where we're asking for income eligibility once again, and where your need didn't change, but your income may have changed at the end of the day. So we're really just trying to get to people when they have that need. And it is a challenge. We certainly have enough contractors. I don't think that that's my challenge. I think the challenge really has been Social Security office and trying to determine eligibility. Those offices have been closed lately. Many of our clients who used to go into those offices now have to set up appointments, and those appointments are 3 months out. So we're actually looking at alternatives to identify eligibility because those things are impeding our ability to move fast. We don't have all the answers at the moment, but we are looking at every opportunity is to move this thing a lot quicker. Yes.
Just a recommendation, and I'll acknowledge Councilman Jamie Gauthier for a point of information. Maybe on the federal piece in terms of helping individuals through the process to determine if they are qualified or not. Maybe engaging in a partnership with Congressman Dwight Evans or Congressman Brendan Boyle to maybe see if there's a way where, because you're working collaboratively together, they may come up with a process with people specifically for the housing initiative that they can work with Social Security Administration to help streamline that process.
Well, let me just say this. I think the fact that we're trying to utilize a more flexible resource has given me a lot more flexibility. So I'm not as tied to those same restrictive requirements. So we're very much open to, you know, if you will, looking outside the box, so to speak. So we actually will come up with alternative solutions because we're not going to be handcuffed by what's going on at the federal level.
But additionally,
that's another form of resistance too, so thank you.
Absolutely, but I also want to say, you mentioned several of our congressional leaders. We're also working with our congressional delegation, ensuring that they are informed about our home plan, what our initiatives are, and how we need their help now more than ever. So, and that's the same at the Commonwealth level as well. With, you know, we talked about Robin Weissman, but even beyond her.
Good to hear that. Councilman Jamie Gauthier.
Quickly, I just wanted to put a finer point on this issue. So clearing out the backlog for incredibly popular, effective programs makes a lot of sense and can give us some quick wins. But as we do that, we also have to do that within the context of our spending plan. If, for instance, clearing out the backlog for BSRP or adaptive mod is going to take up the majority of our what we plan to be spending in any given year, and we're dramatically increasing the amount of people that are eligible, then we have to think about that in terms of the money that we're allocating to these programs. So
Yes.
just wanted to make that point.
Absolutely, and I just want to, end by saying we can walk and chew gum at the same time. So absolutely agree with your point.
As a
Johnsonism.
That's what's up. Listen, we thank you, and thank you, Tiffany, Chief of Staff, and Rob DeBoe, and Jesse, and the whole team as a whole, for one, following up on the callback, and also just indulging us as we do our due diligence around this process. And again, I know the spirit of this body is within line of the overall vision and mission regarding addressing the housing crisis and addressing the issue of housing inequality here in the city of Philadelphia. And so this is just another part of the process of us going through the details and making sure that we can figure out a way to do continue our partnership, I'll say that, in terms of addressing this very critically and important issue. So thank you for your time, and we'll be in recess until 2:30.